bossy from the living room, delighted and offended at the same time. The memory sat in the back of my mind like a pin, small, sharp, impossible to ignore. Then the pin twisted into something heavier. Thomas. Walking into a room full of wolves and elders and old overblown pride. I set my school bag on the entry table with more care than it deserved. Alice was on the sofa like she'd been placed there by a spring-loaded mechanism, perfect posture, perfect clothes, perfect focus, and the moment I crossed the threshold her head snapped toward me. "You're here," she said, not asking. Her eyes flicked over me in a single, rapid inventory. "And you didn't bring Bossy in with you." I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just took a slow step farther into the room and let my voice stay level. "He's going to the meeting." The brightness in Alice's expression didn't disappear, but it tightened at the edges, like someone had pulled a ribbon too hard. Esme appeared from the kitchen doorway, hands already drying on a towel she didn't need. Her face was soft, but her eyes went straight to mine. "Is he all right?" she asked. "He's himself," I said. It wasn't comfort. It was truth. Determined to be reasonable where other people aren't. Carlyle walked up behind her, calm as always. If I chose to focus on his mind I'd find the same measured current, risk, probability, a doctor's refusal to panic. But I didn't need to. I could see it in the set of his shoulders. "You're staying here," Carlyle said, not an order, not a question. A statement made to protect everyone. "I am," I agreed. Alice tipped her head, eyes narrowing. "I can't see it," she said, irritation clipped into the words. "Not cleanly. The moment Thomas is too involved, everything goes wrong. Like someone smeared ink over the path. Anything to do with the pack just makes it worse." I knew. All of us knew. Alice's gift wasn't broken. It was adapting, and Thomas was the variable that made it stumble. "Then don't chase the path," Carlyle said gently. "Plan for what we know." Alice huffed, then snapped her attention toward the stack of papers on the coffee table like she could physically wrestle the world back into place. "Fine," she declared. "Wedding planning. Because if I don't have something I can control, I'll start redecorating the future." Esme's lips pressed together in a fond, long-suffering way. "Seating," Alice said, flipping a page. "Music. Timeline. Emergency contingency plans for human panic." Esme lifted her chin slightly. "I was thinking about Renee," she said softly, latching onto the practical. "If I reach out first, just a call, she might feel welcomed instead of surrounded." Renee was an unpredictable weather system wearing a smile. "A call is safe," Alice agreed. "A call is normal. A call is. One call is dangerous," I interrupted quietly, and all three of them looked at me. I kept my posture calm. I kept my voice gentle. But I didn't soften the meaning. "Renee loves loudly," I said. "And she fears loudly. If she feels excluded, she will compensate. If she feels included, she will compensate. The only difference is how much collateral damage happens in the process. If we involve her, we need to plan to contact her often now that we know she is coming. We need to make her feel included on purpose, not as an afterthought." Esme's expression didn't change, but her thoughts, if I'd chosen them, would have warmed with sympathy for the woman she had never met and already wanted to comfort. "We'll do it carefully," Esme said. Alice's eyes flicked over me again, sharper. "You're wound tight." I didn't deny it. I had spent years being calm because calm was useful. Calm kept my family safe. Calm kept the humans from seeing teeth and hunger and the thin edge beneath our polite masks. But calm was not the same thing as gentle. "And you," Alice went on, voice brightening as if she could force it, "are going to sit down and look at these swatches because if you start thinking about Thomas too loudly I will throw you out a window." I offered, still calm. Alice blinked, then laughed once, sharp and pleased. See? That's you. Esm's gaze slid to mine, careful. Edythe. I heard what she didn't say, don't let the worry turn into something you can't control. I exhaled slowly. I'm here, I said again. I'm not going to make this worse. I meant it. But I also knew what I would do if Thomas didn't come back safe. Not because I lacked control. Because when I loved with teeth. Alice slapped a page down like she was physically pinning the conversation back to the wedding. Invitations, she announced. We need to finalize who is and isn't going to be there. A pause, and then her eyes flicked to me. The elders, she said, tone carefully casual. Are we doing that? Esm didn't look away. Carlyle didn't intervene. They were letting me answer, because they understood what this was. Not etiquette. Strategy. And, worse, symbolism. I've been thinking about Leah, I said. Alice's head snapped up. Leah. Yes. Esm's voice stayed gentle. Would that help? Or would it read as provocation? A vampire wedding invitation to a wolf who had become a symbol of resistance and pain and pack politics? Carlyle's voice was calm, clinical. It depends on who interprets it. The elders, Alice said flatly. And Sam, Esm added, softer. If Leah comes, I said, she comes for Thomas. Not to support me. Not to support Bella. Not to make peace with the Cullens. Thomas. Alice's eyes narrowed, curiosity sparking. That's complicated, I finished for her. Esm's expression softened. Would Thomas want her invited? He would want the choice to be hers, I said. And he would want it handled in a way that doesn't turn her into a message. Alice made an impatient sound. Everything is a message. Yes, I said, and my voice stayed mild. That's why we're being careful. Carlyle nodded once. We can wait on that decision. We don't need to decide tonight. I didn't like waiting. Waiting was helplessness dressed up as wisdom. But I forced myself to nod. Fine. Alice's attention suddenly went distant, eyes unfocusing for the briefest flicker, her gift catching on something that wasn't here yet. Then she snapped back with a grin. Katrina, she said. Esm straightened. Carlyle's focus sharpened. Kate? I asked. Alice nodded. She's coming, she will be here in the next couple of days. The name landed with a strange, familiar weight. Not unpleasant. Not entirely comfortable, either. Kate was a sharp line in my past, bright, electric, and too honest in ways that made it impossible to pretend I was only what my family expected. For a time, she'd been relief. An answer to loneliness I'd never admitted to out loud. And now she was coming into a house full of wedding plans, old wounds, and a future balanced on a treaty line. Esm's voice stayed gentle. Just Kate. Alice's grin faltered by a fraction. Not guilt. Annoyance. The kind that meant the future wasn't giving her what she wanted. Just Kate, she admitted, as if the words tasted wrong. Carlyle didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He only said, calm and measured, then we plan with that in mind. Alice flipped a page with too much force. Fine. Denali section 1. Esm's brows drew together. But Tanya. Alice cut her off with a sharp lift of her pen. Don't. I'm not getting anything useful when Thomas is involved and the pack is involved and the word wedding is involved. It's like the future is doing that thing where it smiles politely and shuts the door in my face. That's called consequences, I said mildly. Alice glared at me. Don't be wise. You're only wise when you're worried, and it makes me want to throw pillows. I'm worried and wise, I agreed. It's a package deal. Esm's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Because Thomas was still out there. And even in this warm, familiar room, my mind kept reaching past the walls like a hand searching for something it couldn't quite touch. Okay, Alice said briskly, forcing brightness back into her tone. Guest list. Humans first, because humans are fragile and they need to feel important. Carlyle's gaze shifted to me briefly, quiet permission, quiet reminder. Stay calm. Stay here. I stayed in my chair. I kept my posture loose. My face was composed. And under it all, part of my focus was watched the windows for Thomas's truck. Charlie Swan, Alice said, tapping her pen on the page. Renee and Phil, Esme added immediately, and I heard the warmth in her voice, the careful, deliberate kindness she offered strangers because she couldn't stop herself. And Bella, Alice continued. Obviously. Angela Weber, Esme said, softer, like she was naming a kind thing she wanted to protect. Alice scribbled. Ben Chaney. Then her pen hovered. Mike and Jessica. No, I said at the same time Esme said, maybe. Esme blinked, then gave me an apologetic look. I just don't want Charlie overwhelmed. He'll be overwhelmed by Renee, I said calmly. Mike and Jessica will be unnecessary damage. Just make sure to give him an invitation for a +1. Alice's eyes lit with vindication. Thank you. Esme sighed, but she nodded. All right. No Mike, no Jessica. Good, I said, because the last thing Charlie needed was Jessica Stanley sniffing for scandal like it was perfume. Alice made a satisfied noise and moved on. The wedding party. There is no wedding party, I reminded her. Alice's eyes flashed. There is always a wedding party. There is a bride and a groom, I said. And a collection of witnesses trying not to terrify the minister. Carlyle broke into the conversation, speaking of that. Who is going to officiate at the wedding, do we have an idea on that? The room paused. Alice's pen hovered above the paper. Esme's hands stilled where they'd been smoothing an invisible wrinkle from the edge of a seating chart. Even the quiet in the house felt like it leaned in, waiting. For a moment, no one spoke, because naming a person meant inviting them into our orbit, into our secrecy, into the thin strip of normal we were trying to lay down like a runner over broken glass. I didn't let the silence grow for long and blurted out my first thought. What about you? I said, the words simple because the solution was. You could get ordained online nowadays. Alice blinked once, then her face lit like someone had just handed her a new set of blueprints. Oh, she breathed, delighted. Oh, that's perfect. Esme's eyes widened, then softened. Carlyle. Carlyle went still, not startled, not offended, just caught in that familiar pause where he weighed the ethics, the logistics, and the humanity of it all in the space of a heartbeat he didn't need. It would, he said carefully, eliminate several risks. It eliminates all of them, Alice declared, already moving, already rearranging the world in her head. No strangers. No awkward questions. No minister trying to make small talk about how pale everyone is. Esme's mouth curved, a quiet, fond thing. Alice. I'm just saying, Alice insisted, but she was smiling. Carlyle officiates. Bride and groom. Witnesses. Done. Carlyle's gaze shifted to me, calm and steady. Would you be comfortable with that? I kept my posture composed. I kept my voice gentle. But I didn't soften the truth. I'd be comfortable with family, I said. With someone who understands what this is, and what it isn't. Esme's expression warmed, and for a second the worry in her eyes loosened. Then we'll do it properly. Alice snapped her pen down like a judge's gavel. Settled. Now, back to invitations. If Carlyle is officiating, that changes placement. Sight lines. Timing. The processional. There is no processional, I said. Alice's gaze snapped to me. There is always a processional. There is walking, I corrected, still calm. From one point to another. Ideally without tripping. Esm's mouth curved, quick and quiet. Carlyle's expression stayed composed, but there was a softening around his eyes that meant he was amused and pretending he wasn't. Alice stabbed her pen toward the page. Fine. Walking. Who walks with you? I do, I said. I have legs. If you don't trust me to be steady on them, then Carlyle can do that too. He is my father in this life after all. Alice's eyes widened, just a fraction, surprise first, then delight, like I'd handed her a new ribbon to tie around the whole event. Esm's expression softened in a way that made the room feel warmer without anyone moving. Carlyle went still for a moment, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. You don't have to. Esm began, gentle. I know, I said. I'm not obligated. I'm choosing. Alice recovered fast, pen already moving again. Okay, okay. Bride escorted by officiant father. That's, actually more perfect. Her eyes lit with the kind of certainty that only Alice could manage. Symmetry. Family. Minimal stranger risk. Also, it will make Charlie feel like this is normal, because humans love father things. So do vampires, Carlyle agreed quietly. Esm's gaze stayed on me. Would that make you comfortable? I didn't let my voice sharpen. I didn't let my face change. But I didn't pretend this was only logistics, either. It would, I said. It's honest. Carlyle inclined his head once, a small acknowledgement that carried more weight than a speech. Esm's fingers tightened together briefly, like she was holding onto the warmth of the idea. Front row, Alice said, tapping the paper. Charlie and Bella together. That's non-negotiable. Renee and Phil. Close enough for Renee to feel included, Esm said softly, but not so close she can redirect the day. Alice wrote quickly. Renee, aisle seat, quick exit, line of sight to Bella. And Phil next to her, Esm added. He steadies her. Good, I said. Because if Phil isn't there to absorb her energy, she'll attempt to recruit strangers. Alice looked up, eyes bright with grim delight. I love when you talk about humans like they're storms. Humans are storms, I said, mild. They just think they're sunshine. Esm sighed, half amusement, half resignation. We'll call her. More than once. Alice added a note in the margin. Renee contact schedule. Don't, I warned her without looking. I'm doing it, she said, cheerful and entirely unrepentant. Carlyle's gaze slid to the windows, then back to me, quiet reminder without words. Stay here. Let Thomas handle what he chose to handle. I just sighed internally and focused on the wedding details again. Chapter 173, A Phone. Thomas POV. Gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled yet again into the parking area for the tribal town hall. The sun was still up, but I knew it would be dark before I got back to Edythe. I turned off the ignition and held the keys in my hand as I took a bit of time to collect my thoughts before going in. The deal was that I agreed to train them. Hell, I had asked for the opportunity to do it so they wouldn't lose anyone unnecessarily. But their bull-headed attitude was wearing on me, and now they expect me to be what? Their whipping boy? Scapegoat? Punching bag? I exhaled and let my temper calm. I knew I was going to have to keep a tight leash on that if I didn't want to burn bridges today. But I'll be damned if they think they can walk over me like I am their bridge. With that thought, I got out of the truck and made my way to the entrance. Jacob was there near the doors, hands in his pockets, posture loose like he wasn't standing guard. He must have spotted me as I pulled in, but he gave me time to approach the door before he pushed off the post he'd been leaning on and greeted me. Hey, he said, voice normal on purpose. You came. Yet, well, with such a warm invite, I didn't want to be rude. I joked. Then I paused as I thought of something. Hey Jake. I wanted to thank you for showing Edward what his leaving did to Bella. That never sat right with me. Jacob's face showed his surprise, then his eyes narrowed. Then why are you letting that bloodsucker stay with her? He is all wrong for her, man. You have to see that someone else would be better for her. Easy there, Jake. I am in love with one of those bloodsuckers. She will be my wife in less than 2 weeks. Hate Edward because he is a brooding, emo, punk, that drives a flashy car and hasn't used a comb in 100+ years, and his taste in music is from the 1700s. Hate him because he and Bella are together. But not because he is a vampire. I paused and let my words sink in. Well, if he was a human-killing vampire, then that would be different. But then Bella wouldn't want to be with him, would she? Jake just stared at me with his mouth open and closing like he was trying to say something. Hate him because he has what you want. But that's time wasted you could be using in figuring out a way to tell her how you feel so she stops and takes a hard long look at you. Give her a reason to doubt herself in the conviction that Edward is the only one for her. But if your only complaint is that Edward is a monster, then her options are Mike and Tyler. And Mike is a douche, so that only leaves Tyler in the running for the Forks area, and he damn near killed her driving like a fucking idiot. To really drive my point home, I finished my speech with, the last thing to consider is the imprint. You run with Sam and Leah, you share their thoughts. Imagine being on either end of that. Leah's loss because Sam imprinted on someone so close to her. Sam's loss because he has to live with the fact he turned away from Leah for an imprint. Think of all of that and then ask me why I don't step into the middle of whatever you, Bella and Edward have going on. It wasn't very fair of me. A lot of what I said I had only thought about because of what Edythe said about Leah. But that didn't make the words any less true. I paused as a slight flush colored my cheeks. Sorry to offload on you like that, man. I have a lot on my mind. Guess I am a little more geared up for a fight than I thought. Jacob stared at me for a long second, blinking like he was trying to decide whether to be offended, relieved, or both. Then he huffed a short laugh, more air than humor. Dude, he muttered, shaking his head. You're something else. I shrugged once, trying to let the heat bleed off. Yet. That's what I'm told. Jacob's eyes narrowed again, but the edge wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed past the door at the room waiting inside. You're not wrong, he said finally, voice lower. About any of it. His jaw tightened. But don't talk about imprinting like it's a plan. It's not a plan. It's a curse. I nodded, letting that land. Fair. But do those that imprinted feel the same way? He studied me a beat longer. He must have decided to not answer that last question since he jerked his chin toward the doors. Quill's already in there. He's been practicing speeches. Lucky me. Jacob reached for the handle, then paused. For what it's worth. I wasn't trying to be nice this morning. I know, I said. He grimaced. I was trying to hurt him. I know, I repeated, and kept my voice steady. Sometimes people deserve the truth delivered ugly. I just don't want you to confuse that with problem solved. Jacob's mouth tightened. It's not solved. No, I agreed. It's not. He pushed the door open and we stepped into the town hall. Warm air hit first, old heater, damp wool, coffee, the faint lingering smell of cedar and something like smoke that had soaked into the building over decades. Folding chairs filled the room. The long table at the front made it feel like a courtroom even if nobody wanted to call it that. They were already seated. Billy was centered, calm and watchful. Beside him, old Quill sat like a coiled spring, eyes sharp, mouth already set in a line of disapproval. A few other elders flanked them, faces and names I knew by now, each carrying their authority like a weight they expected everyone else to shoulder. Sam stood off to the side with several of the pack. He wasn't sitting. None of them were. Postures loose, but not relaxed, like their bodies were remembering the run even while their minds sat still. Leah was farther back than most, arms crossed, expression flat. She didn't look at me like she hated me. She looked at me like she'd already decided exactly what she was willing to tolerate. Jacob peeled off toward the wall, half behind me but not hiding. More like he was making sure I had someone in the room who wouldn't let things turn into a dogpile. I took a front row seat without waiting to be told where to sit. Chairs creaked. Eyes tracked me. A couple of whispers died the moment I looked up. Billy waited until the room settled. Then he spoke, voice even. "Thomas. Thank you for coming." I nodded once. "Billy." Old Quill didn't wait his turn. "So," he said, loud enough to catch every ear. "The Cullens' trainer arrives." I kept my face neutral. "I'm not training the Cullens." A few people shifted, small reactions, pack instinct responding to the first spark. Quill's eyes narrowed. "You live with them." "I live with my fiancé at my house," I corrected, and kept my tone polite. "Not as their servant. Not as their representative." That earned a murmur, some approval, some irritation. Billy lifted a hand slightly. "Not a command. A reminder that there was supposed to be order here." Quill ignored it anyway. "You were told about the treaty," Quill said, and his voice got sharper. "You were told where our line is. And yet your family pushed that line." My jaw tightened. I forced it loose again. "Victoria crossed that line," I said. Old Quill's eyes narrowed. "Don't play word games with me, boy." "I am not playing," I replied, keeping my voice even. "A vampire named Victoria, the people-eating type of vampire, came into Cullen territory while I took my fiancée, my sister, and her boyfriend to visit my aunt. When the remaining Cullens found out, they chased her in order to kill her. But she ran to your border, and you saved her from the Cullens and allowed her to escape." The room erupted into grumbles, but I kept on talking over them. "It may not have been on purpose, but that is what happened. Your pack was so worried about vampires you have a treaty with. Vampires you know feed only on animals much like you do. That you allowed one who your sense of smell should have told you was a human-killing kind, to survive." The grumbling rose in volume, threatening to become shouting. It was anger looking for a place to land. I didn't give them time to target me with it. I lifted my voice without raising it, the way you do when you refuse to be drowned out. "Listen to what I actually said," I continued. "I didn't say you wanted her to escape. I said your response gave her the opening she needed. Those are different things." Old Quill's face tightened like I'd insulted him personally. "The pack did what it was supposed to do. Protect our land." Billy's hand came down on the table, one solid sound. Not a slam. A gavel without a gavel. "Enough," he said. The room didn't go quiet, but it thinned. "Focused. Thomas. Don't accuse us of saving a killer on purpose." "I'm not," I said immediately, and I meant it. "I'm telling you we're going to keep losing ground if the treaty line becomes the only thing anyone can see." I let my gaze sweep the elders, then the pack standing along the walls. Sam's expression was a blank mask. Jacob's wasn't. He looked like he wanted to argue with everyone in the room. "A real threat showed up," I said. "A human-killing vampire." And instead of a clean response, the situation turned into everyone watching everyone else. Old Quill scoffed. "Because we're supposed to trust vampires now." "No," I said, still steady. "You're supposed to trust your own priorities. And your own senses, the pack's senses." I nodded towards Sam. "Your wolves know the difference. They can smell what she is." Sue leaned forward and asked. "If she was that dangerous, why were the Cullens close to our boundary at all? Because that was the part they kept looping back to. The part that let them feel righteous. Because she ran there, I said. Because she figured out the quickest way to slow the Cullens down was to make you show teeth at them. I don't know if she knew about the pack or if her senses just told her that was the only way to escape or if she was just the luckiest vampire in history. Old Quill snapped, and you expect us to believe that? I expect you to recognize a trap, I said. And I expect you to stop acting like I'm here to take blame for it. The room tightened again, some approving, some bristling. I kept going before anyone could turn it into a shouting match. You called me here like I'm accountable for the Cullens, I said. I'm not. I'm not their spokesperson. I'm not their representative. I'm not the treaty made flesh. I'm a trainer. I offered to train your pack because I don't want teenagers dying for old men's pride. Billy's eyes stayed on me, measured. And what is it you want from us tonight? I took a breath. Held it. Let it go. I want two things, I said. 1. Clarity. If I'm training, I'm training. You don't get to drag me into politics every time someone is angry at the Cullens. Old Quill's lips curled. And 2. A better protocol, I said. Because next time Victoria comes near the line, she's going to do the same thing. She learned it works. A murmur moved through the room at that, because they could all believe that part. Sam's jaw flexed once. Jacob's hands curled in his pockets. I nodded towards Sam. Your pack split. Old Quill jumped on the opening. Because we had to contain the threat on our border. Contain the wrong threat, I said, and kept it controlled even as heat sparked under my ribs. Half of you stayed locked on the Cullens. Half of you tried to chase Victoria. That allowed her to escape into the sea. Sam's eyes flicked to me, brief warning, careful. I was careful. Who chased her? Billy asked, and his voice was the one that mattered. Who took point? A beat. Then Sam answered, flat and factual. Leah did. The room shifted, some elders reacting to the name the way they always did, like Leah was a complication made flesh. Sue glared daggers at those elders. Old Quill's eyebrows lifted. Leah Clearwater led. Leah's face didn't change. If anything, her posture got straighter. She moved, Sam said. She didn't wait for permission. Leah's eyes cut to the elders. Because she was there. Because a vampire that smelled like the stories said was there. Old Quill's mouth tightened like he hated agreeing with her logic even if it was sound. And you stayed, I said, looking at Sam. Sam's eyes didn't blink. I stayed. To watch the Cullens, I finished. Sam didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. Billy's gaze sharpened. Why? Sam's voice stayed level. Because if they crossed, it's war. And if this Victoria kills another human? Leah shot back. The edge in her voice wasn't aimed at Sam alone. It hit the whole room. Are we not responsible for that now? The elders stirred, uneasy. Because Leah's point was too sharp to ignore. My voice pulled all eyes back to me. If we had something in place, a number the Cullens could call. It could have been a perfect ambush to end a threat. So instead of beating our chests about what might have been or what almost maybe happened, let's come together and fix it. Billy's voice stayed calm, but it carried. Leah's question is valid, and Thomas's idea has merit. Sam nodded. Let's stop trying to fix the blame on someone and fix the problem. Old Quill's mouth tightened. So now we take orders from an outsider. Billy didn't look at him when he answered. We take advice from anyone who keeps our people alive. That shut Quill up for half a breath. Not because he agreed, because Billy had rank in this room in a way Quill couldn't fake. The other elder in the room, Terry Yindy, cleared his throat. What does this protocol look like in practice, Billy. Billy's gaze stayed on me. Say it again. Cleanly. No speeches. I nodded once. 3 parts. I held up a finger. First, if the pack scents a hostile vampire, human blood kind, near the line, priority is the hostile. Not the Cullens. A few wolves nodded. A few other wolves and Quill looked like they wanted to argue and didn't know how to do it without sounding foolish. Second, I continued, you keep 1 anchor on the treaty line. 1. Not half the pack. If a Cullen crosses, that wolf calls it. Then you respond. Sam's head dipped slightly, this was the part he'd already been turning over in his mind. Third, communication. A runner. A point of contact. Someone the Cullens can reach without stepping over the line and someone you can reach without dragging the entire council into it. Old Quill's eyes narrowed. You want to be that messenger? I shook my head, no. It would be better if it was something simple like a phone that passed to a member of the pack that is in human form. Then if the Cullens need to pass a message they can call them and the wolf can shift and instantly tell the pack what's going on. At the same time the Cullens will give you a number if you need to pass a message. No border crossing involved, just communication. Billy's gaze stayed on me for a long beat, measuring the idea the way he measured everything, by whether it kept people breathing. Sam's eyes sharpened a fraction. Not suspicion, focus. The kind that meant he'd already started mapping the logistics. Old Quill gave a dismissive grunt. Phones, he said like the word tasted wrong. Like children. It's 2006, I replied, still even. Humans use phones to stop car crashes and call for help. This is the same thing. The only difference is our emergency is a vampire. A few of the wolves, Paul, Jared, shifted their weight like they wanted to talk and didn't want to be seen wanting it. Billy turned his head slightly toward Sam. Can you make it work? Sam didn't hesitate. Yes. Old Quill's gaze snapped to him. You'd trust a vampire's number? Sam's voice stayed flat. I trust the pack's nose, and I trust the treaty when it's followed. A phone doesn't break either of those. Leah's mouth curved, not a smile. More like satisfaction that someone else finally said the obvious. Terry Yindi nodded slowly. So it's a handoff system. One wolf stays human with the phone. They call. He shifts. He runs. Exactly, I said. Simple. Fast. No one has to guess. No one has to assume the worst. No one has to stand there posturing while a killer vampire disappears into the trees. Billy's eyes narrowed slightly. And the Cullens agree to this. They'll agree to anything that keeps Bella alive and keeps you from snapping at them every time they breathe wrong, I said, then softened it before it turned into a jab. They'll agree because it benefits everyone. Old Quill muttered something under his breath that sounded a lot like vampire tricks. I didn't bite. Billy leaned forward a fraction. If we do this, Thomas, you understand what it changes. It changes nothing about the treaty, I said immediately. It changes response time. It changes the chances that Victoria or any other vampire gets away. Billy's gaze moved around the room, elders, then the pack. Any objections that are about survival and not pride? Silence. Not agreement. But no one had a better option they could say out loud. Fine, Billy said. Sam will set it up with Thomas. Sam nodded once. I'll talk to Carlisle tomorrow, no reason to include Thomas more than this. We'll trade numbers. We'll decide who holds the phone first. Old Quill bristled. You'll talk to Carlisle. Sam's eyes didn't move. Yes. Billy didn't rescue Quill from it. He let that land. Then Billy's focus shifted, controlled, careful. Bella Swan. Jacob went still again, like the air had tightened around his ribs. Billy's voice stayed even. If Victoria comes back for her, Forks becomes a battlefield. We don't want that on anyone's doorstep. Terry Yindi's brows lifted slightly. You want to bring her here? I want options, Billy corrected. If there's a warning, if there's movement, if the pack scents her, Bella needs somewhere she can go where she's protected without the Cullens having to cross lines. Old Quill's eyes narrowed. Our land isn't a vampire shelter. It wouldn't be, I said. It would be a human shelter. She's Charlie's kid. She's also the bait Victoria wants. Whether you like it or not, that makes her part of the problem. Leah's voice cut in, flat. And if we keep pretending she isn't, then we're just waiting for blood. Sam's jaw flexed once. If we need to, we can bring her to the res. It doesn't mean she's welcome at bonfires and story time. Jacob's glare snapped to Sam. Billy held up a hand. Not a standing invitation. Not a social call. A contingency. And his eyes flicked to Jacob, then to me, maybe, at times, education. Stories matter. If she understands what the treaty means, she stops stumbling into it. Old Quill looked like he wanted to argue that too, but Terry spoke first, mild and practical. Charlie's a friend to this tribe, Terry said. Keeping his daughter alive isn't charity. Billy nodded. Exactly. I exhaled slowly, letting that point settle without pushing it. Now, Billy said, and the word had finality in it, Thomas. I looked back at him. You made your boundary, Billy said. You train. You don't answer for the Cullens. You don't take blame meant for someone else. Good, I said, because if I said anything more it would turn into a speech, and Billy had asked for none. Old Quill's mouth tightened again. And if the Cullens cross? Then you handle it, I said. Not me. Not tonight. Not ever. Billy didn't flinch. Agreed. Sam's eyes moved to me, brief and direct. Training tomorrow. Same time, I said. He nodded. Good. Billy rolled his wheelchair back from the table and the others stood. Then we're done. I stood too. Jacob fell in beside me as we headed for the doors. He didn't say anything at first. Outside, the air was colder, damp and clean. The sky was dark but surprisingly devoid of clouds. Jacob finally huffed, a short breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. A phone. I glanced at him. Revolutionary, I know. He just shook his head and walked off. Chapter 174, A Wedding PT1. Thomas POV. I stood in my weight room, taking advantage of the mirrors in there to get into this contraption Alice insisted I wear, but it just wasn't fitting like I thought it should. I yanked the tie loose again. Too tight. Or maybe it wasn't the tie, maybe it was the collar. I checked the buttons. Nothing was straining. Nothing looked wrong. So why did it feel like a noose? I slid a finger under the collar and tugged, trying to pretend I wasn't about to pick a fight with cotton and satin, when I heard the door open behind me. You wrinkle that collar, Jasper said, voice dry as dust, or for heaven's sake pop that top button, and I will not be able to save you from Alice's wrath. I met his eyes in the mirror. He looked perfectly put together, like he'd been born wearing formal wear and quiet threats. She must have cut this thing too tight, I muttered. Or I put on more size since she measured me. I gestured at the tux like it had personally offended me. Jasper's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. You didn't put on size. Then why? Because today counts, he cut in, matter of fact. Then he stepped closer and reached past my shoulder, fingers precise, adjusting the knot with a competence that made my fumbling feel pathetic. And your body knows it counts, even if your brain is trying to turn it into a wardrobe problem. I swallowed, watching his hands move. I'm fine. Jasper gave me a look that said he'd heard that lie from soldiers and fools. Sure, he said. You're fine. That's why you've strangled yourself 3 times in 5 minutes. I huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. It's not my fault. It's aggressive tailoring. He tightened the tie again, just enough to be right, not enough to make me want to rip it off. There. Breathe. I did. The air went in easier than it had a second ago, which was annoying. Any last-minute advice? I asked, keeping my tone light because if I didn't, it wouldn't be. Jasper's gaze flicked to the door like he could already feel Alice vibrating through the walls. Stand where you're told. Say what you mean. Don't look like you're planning an escape route. And remember, this day is for her. Your job is to not ruin it. I stared at him. I'm not planning an escape route. His expression didn't change. Then stop standing like you are. I forced my shoulders down. Forced my hands to unclench. The mirror showed me a man dressed like he belonged in a catalogue, not like someone who'd spent the last week juggling wolves, treaties, and a vampire family that could turn a wedding into a battlefield if the wrong person breathed too hard. Jasper gave a small nod, like he'd approved the correction. And Thomas, he added, quieter. Yet. If anything goes sideways, he said, voice still calm, you look at me. Not Alice. Not Carlisle. Me. I frowned. Why you? Because Alice will try to fix everything at once, he said. Carlisle will try to save everyone at once. I'll keep the room from becoming a weapon. That landed heavier than it should have, and my throat tightened for a reason that had nothing to do with collars. I nodded once. Got it. Jasper stepped back, straightening his own cuffs like this was just another day. Then he tilted his head toward the door. Time, he said. Try not to glare at the altar like it owes you money. I exhaled slow through my nose. No promises. That, Jasper said, opening the door, is exactly the kind of confidence Alice likes. Move. Jasper led the way down the hall, and through my house. The closer we got to the door leading to the backyard, the heavier I felt the air get. My mouth was dry, and my arms covered in goosebumps under the sleeves. When Jasper opened the double doors, I felt my vision narrow and lock onto a spot down the aisle that parted the small crowd at the altar everyone was facing. For a second, I looked at the ground and thought I saw a large X taped there with Alice's handwriting saying, "The sacrifice stands here." I blinked and let a small smile creep onto my face as I moved forward. Emmett stood at the front already, big hands clasped in front of him, grin in place like he'd been told to behave and was doing his best to make it look effortless. The tux couldn't hide what he was, nothing could. He looked like a boulder someone had dressed up. He winked at me when I got close, like this was a game. Jasper stepped into position beside him, calm settling over the front like a blanket he'd thrown over all of us. No one else would feel it the way I did, my shoulders loosened without permission. My hands unclenched. He'd done that on purpose. But it was anyone's guess if he used his powers, or it was just his natural calming presence. I took my place and turned to take in the crowd I had missed as I walked the aisle. Starting at the front row on the left side I saw Charlie, and it looked like Alice had gotten hold of his wardrobe. The suit actually fit him. That was the first giveaway. Charlie Swan didn't do tailored. Charlie did serviceable, and then acted offended that anyone expected more. But today? The shoulders sat right. The tie was straight. His hair was combed. He looked like someone had tried very hard to make him feel like he belonged in a room where half the guests could tear steel with their hands and still be ready for a photo shoot. He still looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Beside him sat Sue Clearwater. That, more than the suit, made my chest go tight. Sue wasn't dressed up like she was playing at being fancy. She was dressed like she'd decided this mattered and that was enough. Calm, steady, eyes focused. Though her hand on Charlie's arm had me hopeful that she wasn't here just for her duties as a Quileute elder. Bella had informed me that Charlie had asked her to make enough for their meals that there would be leftovers to take to the Clearwater home from time to time. Next to Sue was a surprise to me, Leah. Edythe had informed me that she was going to invite her, but Leah made no mention of coming during our training. Her face looked tight and more than a little wary, but I locked eyes with her and gave her the warmest smile I could. Her flinty expression softened a little, but her eyes were still unreadable. I forced myself to keep scanning before I stared too long. Across the aisle on the other side, front row right, I found Renee the way you find weather. Not because she was loud, Phil had a hand over hers and she was making a real effort, but because everything about her wanted to spill outward. Her eyes were bright. Her posture leaned forward like she might stand up and clap at any moment, or cry, or both. Phil sat steady beside her, calm as a dock piling in a storm, looking like he'd already accepted his role as human ballast. And next to Renee, Esme. That was smart. Esme's smile was soft, her hands folded neatly, her whole demeanor set to gentle. But it wasn't for a show. She was doing what she always did, making space for someone else to be okay. I caught Renee glancing over her shoulder at the house behind the chairs, my house, and I saw it in her face again, the same flash from when she'd arrived 2 days ago and stopped dead in the driveway like she'd been hit with a memory she hadn't ordered. She'd stared at the porch, the new paint, the clean lines, the yard that didn't match the half-forgotten picture in her head. "It's different," she'd breathed. Not accusing. Not even sad. Just stunned at how time could take something that once belonged to her and turn it into something that belonged to me. Now she looked at it like she was trying to hold both versions at once and failing. "Good luck with that, Aunt Renee." A few seats down from them were Bella and Edward. Bella wasn't giddy, not the way Alice wanted everyone to be, not the way a wedding magazine would demand. She looked thoughtful. Like she was watching the whole setup and trying to decide what it meant, turning it over carefully instead of letting it sweep her away. That made sense. In Bella's world, early marriage was a punchline and a warning wrapped into one. Renee had raised her on the idea that settling down young was a kind of surrender, like you woke up one day in an apron you never chose and realized your life had quietly ended. And yet, Bella's eyes tracked the aisle, then drifted to me, and there was something there, an acknowledgement that surprised me. Not judgment. Not pity. More like recalibration. Like seeing me stand here, alive and stubborn and still myself, was forcing her to admit that a ring didn't automatically equal a cage. If anything, it looked like a choice. A line drawn on purpose. Edward sat beside her, his hand over hers, still and careful. Anchoring without pulling. He looked happy, in that controlled Edward way. Not because he loved weddings, he didn't, but because Edythe was finally getting the day she'd been denied for nearly a century. He kept glancing toward the back like he needed to see Edythe walk down the aisle to confirm it was real. Bella leaned closer once, not to whisper, just to breathe out like she was trying to settle her nerves in the shape of him. Then she looked back down the aisle again, contemplative and steady, as if she were letting herself consider, maybe for the first time, that marriage didn't have to mean losing herself. Maybe it could mean choosing someone and still staying whole. If anyone could read her mind at the moment, they would find her thoughts drifting along the lines of a quick Vegas trip this summer. A little chapel with Elvis satisfying the requirements Edward had put forth before they could have sex. It was the one last human experience she wanted before becoming a vampire. After all, everyone told her that intimacy would matter less than her craving for blood the first few years. She was determined to see if sex was the all-consuming experience described in her books. Behind them sat Angela and Ben, two normal humans who looked like they were attending a wedding and also a documentary about predator animals. Angela was trying very hard to behave like this was normal. Ben looked like he'd already decided he was going to survive by not speaking unless spoken to. Fair strategy. After glancing through the guests, my attention turned to the house and the missing people that would signal the start of this ceremony. Then my gaze slid back to Leah. I didn't know what it cost her to sit here, what it cost her to be in a yard full of vampires when every instinct in her body had been trained to call them enemy. But she was here anyway. That meant something. Movement at the edge of my vision pulled me back. Carlyle just stepped out of the doorway, standing just off to the side of the arch Alice had built out of white flowers and greenery that didn't belong in the Pacific Northwest in March. He looked calm, composed, like a doctor stepping into an operating room. Only today the patient was my future. He met my eyes for a second, steady, reassuring, and then looked away before it became too much. Carlyle didn't do performative comfort. He did quiet. A breeze cut across the yard, lifting the edge of the runner Alice had laid down like it was trying to escape. It carried the scent of wet grass, cedar, and something sweet from the arrangements. Somewhere close, a bird called, then went quiet like it realized it was intruding. The crowd shifted, subtle, the way humans did when they sensed something was about to happen. A whisper moved through the chairs, mostly nerves, mostly what do I do with my hands, energy. Jasper's calm held the whole space together, smoothing the sharp edges before they could slice. And then, barely audible, music started. Not a big swelling orchestral thing. Nothing dramatic. Alice had picked something soft, deliberate. Something that wouldn't make Charlie bolt or Renee sob loud enough to set off car alarms. My throat tightened anyway. First through the archway was Alice. She looked truly beautiful in her baby blue dress, soft and airy, like she'd stepped out of some storybook she'd personally approved. The color made her look almost too bright for a gray Washington afternoon. Her smile was real, but there was tension at the edges of her eyes, like she was holding a dozen moving pieces in place by sheer will. As she walked the aisle to her self-appointed spot in front of the crowd, I saw her glance at Bella, not just a polite sweep, but a quick, assessing look that lingered half a beat too long. When she passed me, her lips parted, and I caught the faintest mutter under her breath. "Vegas," she whispered, irritated in a way that didn't match the dress. "Absolutely not." I blinked. Alice didn't do random. If she was mad at a city, it meant she'd seen something. I didn't have time to chase it. Next out was Rosalie. Her perfectly measured steps and unrivaled beauty drew every eye like gravity. She didn't look nervous. She looked inevitable, like the aisle existed because she was walking it. A soft sound from Emmett, half sigh, half reverence, told me that even after all their years together, he still fell a little harder every time he looked at her. Then Kate came through. Her beauty was unquestioned, but it wasn't the kind that begged for attention. It was the kind that owned the space without trying. She moved with a confidence that felt natural, like she'd never once had to wonder where she belonged. And the second I saw her, the yard faded at the edges. Because my mind went back to the first time she'd walked into the Cullen house, rain on her coat, mischief in her eyes, and the way her voice had cut through the room like she'd brought her own weather with her. "Edythe," warm. Familiar. A little too sharp around the edges. "I heard there's a wedding," she'd said, like it was gossip and fate all at once. Alice asked the question on everyone's mind, "You came alone? The others aren't coming?" Kate's smile faltered. "Not gone, just thinned. They'll only come if it's for revenge," she said quietly. "Revenge on the wolves who killed Laurent." My stomach tightened at that. Why would they want that? It happened months ago, and it was only to stop him from killing my sister. Kate exhaled, slow. "It's Irina." The name came out like a bruise pressed. She was in love with Laurent. Her eyes flicked away, like she didn't want anyone watching grief happen in real time. "She refuses to believe anything but the best of Laurent. She refuses to believe your story is the truth." Edythe's expression didn't change much, she was too practiced at calm, but her voice softened. "I tried to explain to her that he was here because of Victoria. That he wasn't hunting on his own." Kate nodded once. Tanya is trying to get her to see reason, but... Her shoulders lifted and fell, controlled. Grief doesn't listen. Then she straightened like she'd snapped a door shut on the subject. Enough of that. A brighter note, forced but offered. What color shall my dress be? Alice's eyes lit like someone had handed her a weapon. Oh. I have options. Kate's mouth curved, and for a heartbeat it looked almost real again. She turned back to Edythe and let the teasing do what it was meant to do, pull everyone back from the edge. I demand the right to stand with you, my dear Edythe. And now, she added, gaze sliding to me, you should properly introduce me to the man who stole you from me. I'd thought then, briefly, stupidly, that she was just another complication. Now, watching her take her place as one of Edythe's bridesmaids, I understood the truth. Kate wasn't a complication. She was history. And whatever Irina thought about Laurent, whatever the Denali clan carried like a grudge or a wound, was sitting in the back of my mind like a loaded question I hadn't had time to ask yet. Kate reached her spot and finally looked up. Her gaze met mine for a second, knowing, unreadable, then slid away as if to remind me, today wasn't about her. The music kept going, soft and deliberate. The air shifted again. And behind me, the house felt suddenly, full. Like the next door that opened was going to change everything. Chapter 175, Wedding PT2. Thomas POV. The music shifted, still soft, but with a new thread pulled through it. This was a recording of Edward playing the piano now. His beyond human timing and perfection had the whole yard holding its breath. The small crowd stood. The music clearly indicated that the most important participant of the ceremony was about to arrive. Carlyle was the only movement near the door. He stepped full into view next to the arch, careful to block no one's sightline as he waited to walk his adopted daughter down the aisle. He adjusted his cuffs once, a doctor's habit, then folded his hands in front of him and waited. Even Jasper's aura of calm thinned a bit as he waited expectantly. Then she stepped out of the house, not with a flourish, not with drama. Just, with weight. She stood there for a moment, her eyes searching the crowd, landing on every face and meeting their eyes as if to personally thank them for coming. In return, every person straightened just a little more, reached for the hand of a loved one, and just stared at the vision before them. My pulse thudded, hard, as if it had been held until this moment. Edythe had made but one demand of the dress Alice and Rosalie had designed and stitched, and that was no theatrics. Her sisters had delivered. There was no overly intricate design, no sparkles with every movement, just a simple white dress that no one would ever mistake for anything but a wedding dress. It looked soft and light without being sheer, fitted like it was a second skin until it reached her waist, and then it fell in clean lines, moving with the wind as she stepped forward to take Carlyle's arm. And the yard exhaled. Charlie looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. René made a small sound that Phil immediately absorbed by tightening his hand over hers. Bella's eyes went bright, and her expression shifted, not into panic, not into envy, into something steadier. Like she was watching proof being laid down in front of her, that you could choose a life and still keep your spine. Leah didn't move. But her gaze tracked Edythe with the same sharp attention she'd used in training, measuring, assessing, taking in every detail like it mattered. Maybe it did. Carlyle guided Edythe forward at a human pace, slow enough for the humans to keep up with their own feelings. The hem of her dress brushed the runner Alice had laid down, and the scent of flowers and wet grass and vampire skin hit me all at once. My hands went cold. Not fear. Anticipation so sharp it felt like a blade. Jasper shifted his stance beside me. Emmett's grin softened into something almost reverent. And I just stood there, locked in place on that taped X I'd half imagined earlier, thinking, if Alice really did write the sacrifice stands here, she wasn't wrong. Because the second Edythe reached the end of the aisle. The moment Carlyle brought her to me. Everything else I'd survived to get here stopped mattering. The last person Edythe looked at was the one she wanted to see the most, me. And when her eyes locked on mine, the yard blurred at the edges. The crowd. The flowers. Even Edward's music became background, like it belonged to another day. Carlyle paused beside her, steady and patient, letting the moment exist at a human pace. Then he lifted her hand and held it out. I reached for her like it was the only motion left in the world. Her fingers were cool, of course they were, but familiar, perfect in my palm. The second I closed my hand around hers, something in my chest unclenched, like my body finally believed I wasn't going to lose her to distance, or timing, or some old rule written by people who didn't know her. Carlyle's gaze met mine briefly, quiet approval, quiet warning to hold myself together, and then he stepped around us, moving to the front with practiced calm. He took his place beneath the arch, turned to face the small crowd, and folded his hands. The ceremony began. Third-person POV. Carlyle let the quiet settle first, after indicating they could take their seats. Then he spoke. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice warm and steady. "For being here today, for Thomas and Edythe." He paused just long enough for the backyard to breathe with him. For the chairs to stop creaking. For Renee to press her lips together like she was trying to hold herself in one piece. For Charlie to remember to blink. "We're gathered for a simple reason," Carlyle continued. "Two people have chosen each other. Not because it's expected. Not because it's easy. Because it's what they want. Because they believe in the life they're building." His gaze moved to Thomas and Edythe, no lingering, no spectacle. Just a calm focus that made the moment feel grounded instead of staged. "Marriage is a promise," he said. "A commitment made out loud so that the people who love you can witness it, and so that, on the hard days, you can remember you didn't make it alone." Another small pause. Then Carlyle turned slightly toward Thomas. "Thomas," he said clearly, "do you take Edythe to be your wife?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "I do." Carlyle's eyes shifted to Edythe. "Edythe, do you take Thomas to be your husband?" "I do," she answered, quiet and certain. Carlyle nodded once, as if confirming something vital, and then continued without rushing. "Then we will speak vows," he said. "Not because words make a bond real, but because they give shape to what is already real in your heart and soul." He held out his hand, palm up, a quiet invitation. "Thomas." Thomas swallowed once, more out of habit than nerves, and then reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers closed around the folded paper there, creased, softened at the edges from being opened and refolded too many times. He glanced at it like it might betray him. Then he looked at Edythe. For a beat, neither of them moved. The yard felt suspended between breaths. Thomas unfolded the paper carefully, as if the sound alone might be too loud, and began. "Edythe," he said, and the name came out steadier than he felt. "I had this whole thing planned. Something polished. Something that would make Alice preen and make Emmett pretend he wasn't watching for it." A small ripple of quiet amusement moved through the chairs, quick, contained. Carlyle's expression didn't change, but the warmth in his eyes did. Thomas didn't look away from Edythe. "But the truth is," he continued, "I won't make you smaller than what you are. And I won't dress this up in anything that isn't honest." He glanced down at the page once, just long enough to find the line again, then lifted his eyes back to hers. "I love you," he said simply. "Not the idea of you. Not the story of you. You." His hand tightened around Edythe's fingers, an unconscious anchor. "I love how you pay attention," he went on, voice low and steady. "How you hear what people mean even when they don't say it right. How you step in front of the people you love like you were built for it." He breathed in, slow. "And I love that you let me in. That you chose me, even when you didn't have to. Even when it would have been easier to keep your heart locked up where nothing could touch it." Thomas's mouth twitched, the start of a smile that didn't quite make it all the way. I know you don't do theatrics, he said. So I'm not going to promise you a fairy tale. I'm not going to promise you a life where nothing ever goes wrong. He lifted the paper slightly, then lowered it again, as if he didn't need it anymore. What I can promise, he said, is that you will never be alone in it. His voice held, steadying on conviction. I promise to be your partner. To be your home when the world gets loud. To tell you the truth, even when it's hard, and to listen when you do the same. A pause, small, but deliberate. I promise to choose us, he said, on the easy days and on the ones that make us earn it. Thomas swallowed again, then softened, like the last words weren't for the crowd at all. And I promise, he finished, to keep finding you, every time. No matter what tries to pull us apart. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he folded the paper once, careful, almost reverent, and let his gaze stay on hers like the vow wasn't complete unless she saw every part of it. Carlyle waited just long enough for the meaning to settle. Then he turned to Edythe, his voice gentle. Edythe. She didn't reach for a paper. She simply lifted her chin a fraction and kept her eyes on Thomas as if the rest of the yard had stopped existing. I do not have this written down, she said quietly. No apology in it. Just honesty. A faint, restrained sound moved through the crowd, more surprise than laughter, because it was so very her. Edythe's fingers tightened around Thomas's hand, steady and sure. Thomas, she began, and the way she said his name made it sound like a promise all by itself. I have spent a long time believing that wanting things, ordinary things, was selfish. Her voice stayed soft, but it carried. That if I allowed myself to hope for them, I would only be reminded of what I couldn't have. She didn't look away. She didn't blink. And then you walked into my life and treated me like I was allowed to want. Her mouth curved, just barely. Like I was allowed to choose. Thomas's expression shifted, something in him breaking open and holding at the same time. Edythe's voice didn't rise, but it deepened. Settled. I love you, she said, simple and absolute. Not because you are easy. Not because you are safe. A pause, measured. Because you are good. Because you are stubborn. Because you keep showing up, even when it costs you something. And because you can tell me no. Her gaze flicked, the smallest glance, to the crowd, family, friends, witnesses, then returned to him like they were background. You don't flinch at what I am, she continued. You don't ask me to be less. And you don't ask me to perform softness so other people can feel comfortable. A quiet inhale. Controlled. So here is what I promise you. She shifted her hand, bringing Thomas's knuckles closer, as if she needed the contact to keep the words from turning into something too sharp to share. I also promise to choose us, she said. Every day. Not when it's convenient. Not when the room agrees. But every day. Carlyle's face remained calm, but there was warmth there, pride, the quiet kind. I promise to tell you the truth, Edythe went on, and to trust you with mine. I promise to listen when you speak, even when you're angry, even when you're afraid, even when you think you have to carry it alone. Her eyes softened, just enough to make Renee press a hand to her mouth and squeeze Phil's fingers like she needed the reminder that she was still sitting in a chair. And I promise, Edythe finished, voice lowering, that you will always have me. Not as an idea. Not as a dream. As a person who stands beside you. Who defends you. Who comes home to you. She held his gaze, unblinking. Always. The yard didn't move for a beat. Like everyone had agreed, without being told, to give them that second uninterrupted. Carlyle cleared his throat gently, not to break it, just to guide it forward. Thank you, he said, and then his hands lifted slightly. May I have the rings? Alice was already there, of course she was, appearing with a small box like the laws of physics were optional on wedding days. She placed it into Carlyle's palm with a smile that was too bright to be entirely innocent. Carlyle opened the box and looked to Thomas first. "Thomas," he said, "place the ring on Edythe's finger." Thomas's hands were steady now. Whatever shaking had been in him earlier was gone, burned off by certainty. He took the ring, lifted Edythe's hand, and slid it on with a careful reverence that made Charlie's throat work like he was swallowing something he couldn't name. Carlyle turned to Edythe. "Edythe." She took the second ring with the same calm. She did everything, except her fingers lingered on Thomas's hand for half a second longer than necessary, like she was memorizing the moment in a way that didn't require photographs. She slid the ring into place. Carlyle looked at them, one breath, one beat, then faced the crowd. "By the vows you have spoken," he said, voice warm and certain, "and by the rings you have given, it is my honor to pronounce you husband and wife." He paused, just long enough for Renee to inhale like she might cry, again. "Thomas," Carlyle said, and the smallest smile touched his mouth, "you may kiss your bride." Carlyle's words hung in the air for one suspended heartbeat. Thomas didn't rush it. He lifted Edythe's hand, still holding it like he didn't trust the world not to steal her away, then let it fall gently between them as he stepped closer. Edythe tilted her face up, calm and unflinching, like this was the most natural conclusion to every strange, impossible thing that had led them here. Thomas brushed his thumb once over her knuckles, an unconscious check-in. Then he leaned in. The kiss was simple. No performance. No show. Just a quiet claim, deliberate and certain, like a promise sealed without needing to be announced. For a second, the entire backyard forgot how to make noise. Then Renee made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and Phil tightened his arm around her like he'd been waiting for the exact moment gravity would fail. "Oh my God," Renee breathed, voice cracking on the last word, and she pressed her free hand to her mouth like she could hold the emotion in by force. Charlie's face did something complicated, stubbornness fighting softness and losing. He blinked hard, stared at a spot over Thomas's shoulder like he was determined not to be seen feeling anything at all, and then cleared his throat as if that fixed it. It didn't. Sue squeezed his forearm gently, not teasing, not claiming, just steady support. Charlie didn't look at her, but he didn't pull away either. Bella's expression shifted in a way that made it hard to tell where the warmth ended, and the thought began. She smiled, small, real, and her eyes shone like she'd just watched a door open in a house she'd believed was locked forever. Edward's hand tightened over hers, careful and anchoring, and he looked at Edythe like he was both proud and relieved in the same breath. Angela's hands flew to her face, fingers covering her mouth in a quiet, delighted gasp. Ben leaned toward her instinctively, protective without knowing why, then remembered where he was and straightened like he'd been caught reacting. Leah didn't clap. She didn't smile, either. But her shoulders eased by a fraction, and her gaze stayed locked on Edythe with that sharp, measuring focus, like she was cataloging the proof in front of her and filing it under real. When Edythe's eyes flicked toward the front row for the briefest second, Leah held the look and didn't flinch. That, somehow, felt louder than applause. Jasper exhaled softly, and the whole yard seemed to release with him. Whatever tension had been coiled in human bodies loosened, whatever edges had been sharpening dulled. His calm didn't erase the moment, it let everyone survive it without breaking. Emmett broke first, grinning wide as he clapped with enthusiastic, impossible restraint for a man built like a wrecking ball. "About time," he rumbled, low enough to not fully interrupt, loud enough that several people heard and chuckled anyway. Rosalie's expression stayed composed, but her eyes softened, and when she glanced at Thomas and Edythe there was something like approval there, brief and sincere. Alice looked like she might vibrate out of her dress. Her hands fluttered once, then clenched like she was physically restraining herself from launching into a choreographed celebration. A bright, too wide smile flashed, and then she was moving, already turning, already signaling, already trying to herd the universe into her preferred shape. Carlyle stepped back with a small, satisfied nod, the kind that said good, done, alive, and then he faced the crowd again with the practiced ease of someone who knew exactly how to move people from sacred to social without letting either feel cheap. "Thank you," he said warmly. "Truly. Please, stay. Eat. Celebrate with them. And oh, I almost forgot, I present to you Thomas and Edythe Raizel." The crowd clapped at the introduction. Thomas and Edythe didn't separate right away. They stayed close, foreheads nearly touching, her hand still in his posture angled around her like a shield he didn't have to think about. Then Edythe turned slightly, just enough to look out at the small gathering, and her smile changed. Not polite. Not careful. A smile meant for her family. A smile that said, "This is real. This is ours." And for the first time that day, the backyard sounded like a wedding. Chairs scraped. Someone laughed. Renee cried again, unabashed now that the worst of holding it in was over. Charlie muttered something that sounded like an insult but landed like affection. Angela hugged Bella, quick and fierce, before remembering herself and letting go. Leah stood last. Quiet. Watchful. But she stood. And when she finally moved toward the edge of the aisle to let people pass, she didn't look away from the couple at the front. As if she was making sure, just once, that the promise held. The afternoon light kept shifting through clouds above them, and the white flowers Alice had insisted didn't belong in March looked almost unreal against the wet green of the yard. But the rings were real. The vows were real. The way Thomas's hand never stopped holding Edythe's, real. And that was enough. Chapter 176, Wedding PT3. Edythe POV. The first notes of music were already in the air when Carlyle guided us back down the aisle and into the space Alice had declared reception. It wasn't a ballroom. It was Thomas's backyard with string lights, a cleared patch of grass, and a sound system that had been tested 3 times and threatened into obedience by someone who weighed 90 pounds and could see the future. The barn was also set up as a secondary option if the Forks sky felt like dropping rain like Renee's tears. The music came from hidden speakers, of course it did. Alice didn't trust Liv anything on a day she'd planned down to the last breath. Edward's playing, recorded, perfect, turned the backyard into something that felt like a chapel without anyone being able to explain why. Mixed in were other popular songs and several love ballets from the 80s she knew Thomas and I would love. As the sound of Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time started to come from the speakers, Thomas led me to the dance area for our first dance. Edward's eye roll at the music choice caused my smile to increase even more, if that was possible. Thomas's hands were warm. That was still my favorite impossible thing about him. We stepped onto the grass. It was damp beneath my shoes. The air smelled like crushed greenery and sugar and the faint mineral clean that always followed my family no matter how carefully we tried to behave like ordinary people. Thomas's hand landed at my waist like he was handling something precious, not something that could throw him through a wall. The thought made my smile sharpen. I let one hand rest on his shoulder. Not for balance. For contact. For the quiet proof that this was not a scene Alice had arranged, or a story someone had written for us. This was my choice, made visible. Time after time wrapped around the yard, slow and human and earnest in a way that made the string lights feel warmer than they were. Thomas leaned in just enough that only I could hear him. Edward just rolled his eyes so hard I'm surprised it didn't make a sound. I let my smile widen again, just a fraction. He's suffering bravely. Thomas's breath left him in a soft laugh. He is a martyr. Thomas drew me a fraction closer, as if testing whether the world would let him keep me. His palm stayed at my waist, warm and careful in the way humans were careful when they loved something they didn't fully understand. He guided me, not because I needed it, but because he wanted to lead this, wanted to give me the normal shape of it. I let him. My feet found the rhythm without thought. I'd learned to move like a human again for days like this, to let the small sway read as natural instead of too perfect. It was a strange kind of restraint, choosing imperfection so no one would notice the control behind it. Thomas's thumb made a slow pass along the fabric at my side, an absent-minded touch, grounding himself. Or grounding me. You okay? He asked under his breath. The question wasn't really about the dancing. It was about the day. About the crowd. About the vows still ringing in the spaces between heartbeats that didn't exist. I'm better than okay, I said, and meant it. His mouth curved, quick and private. Good. Because I'm trying not to step on your feet. You won't, I promised, and let my voice soften. And if you did, I would survive. He snorted, then sobered, eyes searching mine like he needed to see the truth behind the joke. He found it. Whatever tension had been sitting under his skin eased, just a little, and his shoulders dropped with a sigh that made the song feel more real. We turned slowly on the damp grass. The string lights blurred into warm streaks over his shoulder. I could hear the small sounds of the reception building around us, chairs shifting, a laugh cut off and lowered, someone murmuring look at them like it was an observation in a prayer. Thomas leaned his forehead toward mine, not touching, just close enough that his heat brushed my skin. I kept thinking, he murmured, that I'd blink and this would be over. That I'd wake up and be back in some other version of my life. I lifted my hand from his shoulder to his jaw, fingertips light, contact without pressure. This is the version you chose. His eyes flicked shut for a second. When they opened again, they were steady. And you? He asked, quieter. You really, this is what you wanted? The question was careful. Not doubt. Respect. I let my smile show, small and sharp with how certain it was. Thomas. I have wanted you in every way a person can want something. Even when I pretended I didn't. His breath caught, human, automatic, honest. I slid my hand back to his shoulder and let us keep moving, slow and unhurried, letting the song do what it was meant to do, give everyone else permission to watch without demanding anything from us. I wondered how many of his questions still came from the man who felt he was a little boy crying for all his loss. Only time would let me silence those doubts, and luckily, time is something we have. The last thought settled into me with an odd, unfamiliar softness. Time. For most of my existence, time had been a thing I endured. A long hallway I walked because there was nothing else to do. It had carried loss, distance, hunger, and patience sharpened into something hard. With Thomas, it felt different. Not endless. Ours. The song drifted into its next verse, and Thomas's hand shifted slightly at my waist, subtle, protective, like he could feel the weight in my silence and wanted to hold it up with me. His eyes flicked past my shoulder for half a second, taking in the yard the way a man does when he's still learning to believe he's allowed to keep what he has. Then he looked back at me, and his mouth pulled into that half-smile that always looked like he was trying to hide how much he meant it. You're thinking too hard, he murmured. I arched a brow. I don't know how to do anything else. That's a lie, he said, and it was gentle. You know how to kill things. I let a quiet sound escape me, almost a laugh, too small to count as one. That is not the skill we're featuring today. It's in the brochure somewhere, he said, deadpan, and his thumb made another slow pass along my side like he couldn't help himself. Like the simple fact of touching me was still something he wanted to confirm again and again. We turned. The grass gave slightly under his feet. He adjusted without thinking, leading me away from a slick patch, keeping the motion smooth enough that the humans wouldn't notice. Of course he did. Thomas didn't do anything halfway. Not even pretending to be ordinary. My gaze slid outward for a moment, quick, controlled. Renee sat forward, eyes bright and wet, her attention fixed on us like she was trying to memorize every second before it could be taken from her. Charlie stood stiff near the edge of the dance space, hands shoved into his pockets like that could keep him from being seen caring. Sue was beside him, close enough to anchor, far enough to let him pretend he didn't need it. Bella watched with that same thoughtful steadiness she'd carried through the ceremony, but now there was something warmer threaded through it, like she was letting herself believe that forever could be a choice and not a trap. She leaned into Edward's side just slightly, and he shifted without thinking to make room for her. A quiet habit. A quiet promise. Leah's eyes tracked everything, me, Thomas, the crowd, sharp and watchful the way a wolf watched a clearing. She caught me looking. For a beat, neither of us moved. Then she gave the smallest dip of her chin. Not approval. Not surrender. Acknowledgement. It was enough to make something in my chest ease, a fraction. Thomas followed my gaze, found Leah, then found the tension he didn't fully understand behind it. His jaw tightened once, then loosened as he looked back to me. "You good?" he asked again, softer this time. "Yes," I said. And then, because he deserved more than a single word, I added, "I didn't know I could have this." His hand stilled at my waist. His eyes held mine like he was bracing for something heavy. "I did," he said simply. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't certainty born from ignorance. It was Thomas, choosing belief like it was a weapon he'd decided to use for something gentle. The chorus returned, familiar, human, earnest, and he drew me closer again, forehead nearly touching mine without quite closing the last inch. As the song started to wind down, I made a suggestion, "How about you ask Renee to dance, and I ask Charlie? Then we follow it up with Esme and Carlisle." He bent down and gave me a quick kiss. "Sounds perfect, Mrs. Raizel." We separated as Edward's song he wrote for Esme started to come over the speakers. I made my way to Charlie and Sue. "Mrs. Clearwater, may I steal your date for a dance?" Charlie sighed and took my hand, the thin satin of my glove still holding the last trace of Thomas's warmth, and then, with the grim determination of a man walking into bad weather, he let me lead him toward the cleared patch of grass. Sue's smile didn't soften. It sharpened, quiet triumph, like she'd just won an argument without saying a single word. "I'm warning you," Charlie muttered as we stepped into the edge of the dance space, "I don't dance." "That's all right," I told him. "I'm not asking you to dance. I'm asking you to stand here with me while the music happens." He blinked at that, suspicious. "That's dancing." "It's surviving," I corrected, and let the smallest hint of humor touch my voice. Charlie's posture stayed stiff as a fence post. His palm was rough against mine. Human. Alive. His pulse beat steadily at his wrist, a metronome I could have counted without thinking. I did not think about it. I moved with human timing. Slower than my instincts. Less perfect than my body preferred. I kept my hold light, guiding without trapping, because Charlie Swan didn't need to feel handled. He needed to feel respected. For the first few steps he watched our feet like the ground might betray him. Sue, watching from the edge with her hands folded, lifted her eyebrows in silent approval. Charlie cleared his throat. "So. This is nice." It was the closest he would ever come to beautiful. "It is," I said quietly. His gaze flicked across the yard, string lights, tables, the barn standing ready like a backup plan, and then, inevitably, it landed on Thomas. Thomas had moved the way he always did when he chose something, directly. He was already dancing with Renee, he had her laughing, actually laughing, her shoulders lifting, her face turned up toward him like he'd handed her something she hadn't known she was still allowed to want. For a second his expression softened in a way I rarely saw, like the part of him that still carried old grief had found a place to set it down. "He's going to miss his mother today," I said quietly. "I'm glad Renee could come." Charlie's gaze stayed on them. His jaw worked once, like he wanted to argue with the sentiment on principle and couldn't find the energy. The song wound toward its end. I'd already found Carlisle with my eyes, because some instincts didn't turn off just because the music was slow. "You happy?" Charlie asked suddenly. The words came out blunt, like he didn't know how to shape them into anything softer. I met his eyes. Held them. "Yes," I said. "I'm happy." Charlie stared at me for a long beat, like he was deciding whether he was allowed to believe that. Then his gaze flicked, quick, toward Sue, and whatever he saw there made his shoulders drop a fraction. Then he cleared his throat, rough and quiet, "Talk to each other. Don't let things fester." I did that. Most problems don't fix themselves. "We will," I promised. The song ended. I guided him back to Sue before he could pretend he'd never said any of it. "You should get him out here again, Mrs. Clearwater," I told her lightly. "I just proved it's possible." Sue's mouth twitched. "You did," she said, voice low. "And please, call me Sue." "I will," I answered, and meant it. Sue slid her hand back onto Charlie's forearm with an ease that said mine without saying a word. Charlie didn't pull away but adjust for it subconsciously. Across the yard, Phil watched Thomas and Renee with a fond, resigned expression, the look of a man who'd made peace with being outnumbered by feelings. The next song began, and I moved toward Carlisle just as he offered his hand to Esme. Esme's eyes flicked to me. She gave the smallest shake of her head, gentle, decisive, like a message passed without words, "Not this one." I stopped behind Carlisle, close enough that only he could hear me, and waited until his attention flicked back. Then I asked, softly, "Care to dance with your daughter, father?" He turned to face me, joy on his face, then he nodded once. "I would be honored," he said, voice soft enough that it belonged to me and not the yard. Carlisle guided me onto the grass as if it were any father and daughter at any reception. Carlisle's palm settled at my shoulder blade, light and respectful. Not because he needed to be careful with my strength. Because this was how you danced with your daughter in front of humans. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. I tilted my head. "That is not an unbiased assessment." "No," he agreed, and there was a faint smile in his voice. "It isn't." I watched Thomas over Carlisle's shoulder. He had approached Esme after returning Renee to Phil. The happiness on Esme's face was apparent for all to see as she took his offered hand and moved to the dance area with him. Carlisle took note of the new couple dancing near us and smiled in fondness. "He makes her happy without even trying. You have found a good man, little Edythe." I matched Carlisle's pace, deliberately imperfect, letting the small sway read as ordinary. It was almost peaceful, in the way a familiar lie could be peaceful when it kept everyone else safe. Carlisle's voice softened again. "How are you, truly?" The question wasn't about the dance. It was about the ring on my hand. About the vows. About the shift from almost to always. "I feel settled," I said, and the word surprised me with how accurate it was. Like something that has been braced for impact for a very long time finally realized it could stop. Carlisle's eyes warmed. "That is what I hoped today would give you." I watched Thomas laugh at something Esme said, small, private, meant only for her, and my chest tightened with a feeling I still didn't have a name for. Not sorrow. Not fear. Gratitude, sharp enough to hurt. I didn't know I was allowed, I admitted, quieter. To want a day like this. To want him. Carlisle didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it exist, the way he always did when someone needed to hear their own truth out loud. "You were always allowed," he said finally. "You simply learned, over time, to confuse endurance with virtue." I looked up at him. "And you?" His brows lifted slightly. "Me? You've had to watch all of us," I said. "Hold ourselves together. Pretend we didn't want things. Pretend we didn't ache for them. Did it?" I hesitated, because the word felt too sharp for a day like this. Hurt. Carlyle's expression didn't change much. It never did. But something in his eyes shifted, an old ache acknowledged, then tucked back into place. Yes, he said simply. No drama. No self-pity. Just truth. But it was never a burden to love you. My throat tightened. Useless, unnecessary. Habit. Carlyle's hand rose to my cheek, not to wipe at something that couldn't happen, not to fuss. Just a brief, careful touch, comfort delivered in the only language he ever used, steady presence. You're married now, he said, and there was a gentle humor in it, like he was testing the word for how it fit. Does it feel different? I glanced at the ring. The band was cool against my skin. Permanent without being heavy. Yes, I said. Not because it changed what I feel. Because it made it visible, Carlyle finished for me. I nodded once. Then, Carlyle said softly, my only advice, if you will tolerate it. I will, I answered immediately. His mouth curved, just barely. Do not stop choosing each other after the day stops being beautiful. I held his gaze. We won't. Carlyle's eyes flicked past me, subtle, checking the yard the way he checked a room, humans comfortable, vampires composed, no sharp edges about to cut. Then he looked back at me, and his voice lowered. And Edythe, if at any point you find yourself frightened by how much you have, come to me. Not because I can fix it, he said, gentle and honest, but because you should not have to carry that fear alone. My chest tightened again, that familiar ache that came when love had nowhere to go but deeper. I won't, I promised, and then corrected myself, because he deserved precision. I will. If it happens. Carlyle nodded once, satisfied, not because danger had been removed, but because the plan included honesty. The song began to taper off, the last notes stretching thin across the yard. Carlyle guided our final turn with the same calm grace, then released my hand slowly, like he didn't want to jar the moment. I smiled, thank you for everything. The next dance partner I approached was sitting in a chair looking rather stern of face but wistful in the eyes. Care to dance with me, Leah? Leah's head lifted at my voice. For a heartbeat she looked like she might say no out of sheer reflex, like the word lived somewhere in her bones and didn't require thought. Her posture stayed rigid, shoulders squared, hands braced on her knees as if the chair might try to slide out from under her. But her eyes, those were different. Wary, yes. Sharp. And tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. She glanced past me, quick and automatic, taking in the yard the way a soldier took in exits. The humans laughing too loudly to cover nerves. My family moving with careful restraint. The cleared patch of grass that had been declared safe. Then her gaze came back to mine. You're serious, she said flatly. I am, I answered, and kept my tone gentle without making it pity. You came. You sat through everything. That deserves something better than being left alone in a folding chair. Leah huffed once, almost a laugh, but it didn't have humor in it. You're really trying to make me look like the bad guy at your wedding. I'm trying to make you look like a beautiful woman, I corrected quietly. The kind who gets asked to dance. Her eyes narrowed like she wanted to find the trick in that sentence. Like there had to be one. Because kindness, for Leah, was usually a hook. I offered my hand and waited. I did not rush her. I did not soften my posture to seem less threatening. I was what I was. She knew it. Pretending otherwise would be an insult. The yard moved around us, music shifting, people rising and sitting and pretending not to watch. But Leah stayed still, staring at my hand like it had teeth. You know I can't. She started, then stopped. Can't what? Touch me? Be seen with me? Let herself enjoy anything without paying for it? I didn't fill in the blank for her. I'm not asking you to like me, I said. I'm asking you for one song. Leah's jaw worked. Her gaze flicked over my shoulder, once, to Thomas. To confirm something, perhaps. To measure whether this was his idea. But my control, what if I slip? I do not want to ruin your day. The pain in her eyes made my heart ache. You won't, I said simply. Leah's mouth twitched, humorless. That's a bold promise. It's not a promise about you being perfect, I corrected, and kept my voice low so the humans wouldn't hear the shape of the truth in it. It's a promise about me being prepared. Her eyes narrowed. Prepared how? I lifted our joined hands slightly, still offering, still not pulling. We stand on the edge of the dance space. No spins. No dips. No crowding. One song, slow steps. If you feel it, if you feel anything shift, then you let go and you step back. That's it. Leah stared at me like she didn't know what to do with a plan that didn't come with judgment attached. And if you step on my feet, I added, letting the faintest trace of dry humor touch the words, I will survive. That earned a single breath of a laugh from her, small, startled, gone almost as soon as it appeared. Like it had slipped out without permission. Her gaze dropped to my hand again. To the invitation she'd been treating like a trap. You really don't understand, she murmured, more to herself than to me. I understand enough, I said. You're trying to protect people you don't even like from yourself. That's not nothing. Leah flinched at that, not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate. For a long second, she stayed frozen, caught between instinct and dignity. Then she exhaled through her nose, the sound sharp with surrender that wasn't surrender. One song, she said again, like the rule was the only thing holding her together. One song, I agreed. She placed her hand in mine. Her palm was warm, not quite as warm as Thomas, but there was strength under it that didn't belong to an ordinary girl. A tension coiled tight beneath her skin, like the wolf was awake and listening. I kept my grip light. Not because she could hurt me. Because she needed to know she couldn't. We stepped onto the grass at the edge of the cleared patch, where the string lights didn't glare and the humans wouldn't press in. The music was slow, forgiving, something Alice had chosen for exactly this kind of fragile truce. Leah's shoulders stayed rigid. Her eyes swept the yard once more, fast and automatic. Then she looked at me, jaw set. If I ruin this? You won't, I cut in, gentle but absolute. And if anything goes wrong, it will be because someone else forgot where they were. Not you. That made her blink. It shouldn't have, but it did. Because Leah was used to being the problem people planned around. I shifted my hand to guide, careful to move with human timing, imperfect on purpose. I let her set the distance. Let her decide how close was tolerable. I let her take the lead. Leah took one step. Then another. And the third step was the first one that didn't look like she was bracing for impact. Her eyes stayed sharp. But the fear in them eased by the smallest fraction. Like maybe, just maybe, she could make it through one song without paying for it later. Leah's mouth tightened, like she didn't trust the softness in her own body any more than she trusted mine. You do this a lot? She asked, voice low, rough around the edges. Dance. I tilted my head. No. That earned me a look, flat disbelief. I can, I clarified. But I don't need to. Humans do it because they have to work for grace. It means something to them. And to you? She challenged. I let the question sit for half a beat. Not because I didn't know. Because I wanted the answer to be clean. To me, I said quietly, it means I can stand here and not frighten anyone. Leah's eyes flicked to the crowd again, quick and involuntary. Don't flatter yourself, she muttered. You're still terrifying. I know, but that's only because you know what I am. I said, calm. And you're still here. That hit something in her posture. Not enough to crack it. Enough to prove she felt it. We moved in slow time. One step, then the next. The damp grass gave under our shoes, a soft drag that kept Leah grounded in her body instead of her head. Her fingers stayed tense in mine, not squeezing, not relaxing, like she was waiting for the exact moment the world would demand payment. I watched her face instead. Not to analyze. To notice. A human would have called her beautiful and meant cheekbones and hair and the way her dress fit. I could see all of that, of course. But what I saw first was the strain, the way she held her jaw as if it might splinter, the way her eyes didn't settle anywhere for long, the way she kept herself ready to move even while she stood still. You don't stop scanning, I observed softly. Leah's gaze snapped to mine. Habit. No, I corrected, gentle. Training. Her nostrils flared. Same thing. It isn't, I said, and kept guiding us in a slow arc so we didn't draw attention. Habit is comfort. Training is survival. Leah's lips pressed tighter. She didn't deny it. For a few beats we just moved. The music filled the space between us, something human and careful that made even the string lights seem less harsh. Then Leah said, barely above the song, "You're not supposed to want this." I didn't pretend not to understand. You mean I'm not supposed to want this, I said. Leah's eyes sharpened. You're a vampire. Yes. And he's. Her gaze flicked past my shoulder toward Thomas, and the word caught like it didn't want to come out. He's not. I could have corrected her. Could have explained what Thomas was in the ways that mattered. Could have told her about strength and shifting and the fact that fragile wasn't the right category. But Leah wasn't talking about muscles. She was talking about rules. The world loves rules, I said quietly. Rules are easy to blame when people don't want to admit they made choices. Leah's throat worked. Choices get people killed. Sometimes, I agreed. Sometimes choices keep them alive. Her hand twitched in mine. A tiny spike of tension, like the wolf inside her heard the word alive and wanted to argue. Leah swallowed. You make it look easy. I felt something sharp and private cut through me at that. Not anger. Not offense. Recognition. It isn't, I said simply. I'm just practiced. She stared at me, and for the first time since I'd asked her to dance, her eyes didn't look like they were searching for the trick. They looked like they were searching for the cost. Why me? She asked. There it was. Not why dance. Not why now. Why Leah? I let our steps slow, barely, enough that I could answer without it sounding like a speech. Because you're here, I said. Because you keep showing up to things you don't want to show up to. Because you're treated like a problem when you're actually, a person. Leah flinched like the word person was the cruelest thing I could have offered. Don't, she muttered. Don't what? Don't. She exhaled hard, as if the air was too sharp. Don't make me, soft. I didn't smile. I didn't reassure her the way Alice would have. I just said the truth. I can't make you anything, I told her. I can only give you space to be what you already are. Leah's eyes glistened, not with tears. With pressure. With heat that had nowhere to go. She looked away fast, toward the edge of the yard, toward the barn, toward anything that wasn't the feeling rising in her chest. Leah, I said softly. Her gaze snapped back, furious at herself more than me. What? You're holding your breath, I said. Her jaw worked. Then she forced air in, harsh and audible. It made her shoulders drop, just a fraction. And in that fraction, I saw it, how exhausted she was from being on guard every second of every day. From being the only one in her own head. from carrying anger like it was the only thing that could keep her upright. We kept moving. One song. Just one. The music shifted into its last refrain, the melody thinning, stretching toward an ending. Leah's grip finally loosened, not much, but enough that her fingers stopped feeling like they were made of wire. I don't. She started, then stopped. Swallowed. Tried again. I don't know what you want from me. I let my voice stay quiet. Private. I don't want anything from you, I said. I want you to stop believing you only exist to pay for other people's choices. Leah went still mid-step. Just for a beat. Then she moved again, because stopping would mean breaking. Her voice came out raw. That's not how it works. It can, I said. If you let it. Leah's eyes flicked, quick, toward Thomas again, like checking whether the world was watching this moment too closely. Then she looked at me, and the words came out like they hurt. You don't know what it's like, she said. To have your whole life, your whole future, rewritten without your consent. I didn't look away. I know more than you think, I said softly. Leah's expression twitched, suspicious again, reflex. But the song ended before she could find the argument. The last note faded into the air, and the yard shifted, people clapping for someone else, laughter rising in the wrong places, a chair scraping. I released Leah's hand first. Slowly. Giving her control of the ending. She took one step back like she'd been burned, then froze, realizing she hadn't. Her eyes met mine. For a second, the wolf and the vampire and the human-shaped world around us didn't matter. Just two girls who had survived too much. Thank you, I said quietly. No wait. No demand. Leah's jaw tightened like she hated the fact that the word wanted to exist. Yet, she managed, and then added, rougher, don't make a big deal out of it. I won't, I promised. Leah turned to go, then hesitated, half a breath. Her eyes cut to mine again, sharp but not hostile. If you ever. She stopped, swallowed hard. If you ever do whatever this is again. I waited. Still. Patient. Leah exhaled. Warn me. The corner of my mouth lifted, small, private. I will. And Leah. I plan to make a habit of spending time at Thomas's Rock every Thursday night. She nodded once, tight, controlled, and walked back toward Sue and Charlie like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just made it through one song without paying for it. But I watched her shoulders. And they were not as rigid as they'd been when I'd offered my hand. I had barely let Leah go before Kate appeared at my side, close enough to feel like she'd always been there, smooth, amused, and entirely too aware of everything happening at once. Really? She asked, lips curving. You asked the wolf before you asked me. What am I supposed to think? I turned toward her. That you didn't need rescuing from yourself. Kate's gaze slid past me to where Leah had returned to Sue and Charlie, posture still guarded, but no longer locked like a trap. And she did. She needed permission, I said quietly. One song where no one expects her to be a weapon. Kate studied me for a beat, the teasing still on her face but changing shape. So that's why. That's why, I agreed. Her eyes flicked, briefly, to Thomas across the yard. He'd just finished dancing with Angela and was stepping back with that careful gentleness he used when he didn't want to overwhelm anyone human. Kate looked back at me. You're thinking about his future. I kept my expression calm. I always think about his future. No. Kate's voice stayed light, but her eyes were sharp. Not the next week. The next decade. The words landed cleanly. I didn't deny it. There was no point pretending with Kate. We can't give him everything humans expect to have, I said softly. Not the way they picture it. Kate's mouth twitched. And you're wondering if Leah could. I held her gaze. I'm wondering if Leah could ever have a life that isn't only pain and duty. Kate went still for a half-second, just long enough to show she understood the difference. Better, she murmured. Because if you were trying to use her, I'd bite you myself. A dry sound escaped me, almost a laugh. Noted. Kate's expression brightened again, the public version sliding back into place. She offered her hand like we were only two women at a wedding and nothing more. Now, she said, are you going to fix the insult, or do I tell everyone you've replaced me with a wolf? One dance, I said. Kate's fingers closed around mine, cool and familiar. Finally. I guided her toward the center of the cleared patch of grass at a human pace, keeping my posture relaxed, my smile easy, exactly what the crowd expected to see. Only Kate would notice the truth under it. As we stepped into the edge of the dance space, she leaned in just enough for only me to hear. After this, she murmured, you tell me what you're really planning. And I'll tell you what the Denali will do if Irina's grief turns into something uglier. I met her eyes, calm and certain. Deal. I was trying to finish the wedding in this chapter, but there is still more I want to accomplish, so it will continue a bit more. But, since I have time to play with, I will ask if you as readers want a wedding night R18 scene, or have you had enough of that in this story for now? Please let me know. Chapter 177, Wedding PT4. Edythe POV. I barely heard the next song, just allowed myself to be led by Kate. It reminded me of times we danced and didn't have to keep it human slow, able to dance with speed and grace natural to our kind. Kate had always been one of the most graceful vampires I had yet to come across. Her psychic shocking ability was another special ability of hers. It was one of the most frightening powers out there for our kind. To be shocked and immobile for even seconds was a death sentence when you moved as fast as we could. Its only weakness was that it required physical touch, but with practice and time that could change. You're doing that thing, Kate murmured, eyes locked on mine like she was trying to read my thoughts through them. What thing? Holding 3 different conversations in your mind while your body moves on autopilot. I smiled at her, it's my wedding day. I am allowed. She gave a soft laugh, and her eyes automatically sought out Thomas, mine following hers. Across the yard, Thomas was being mobbed by Renee while Phil tried to contain the excitable woman. Charlie was approaching the group, though he looked reluctant. I smiled at Sue's hand on his arm, steering him with a patient nudge, knowing that's all the steering he would allow. Thomas handled it well, much better than he would have when we first met. He did not do well in crowds back then, and 3 was a crowd. He was growing past his trauma, and I loved him for that. Kate gave a somewhat defeated sigh when she looked back at me. He is good for you, she said. I know. And you are good for him, she followed. Which is inconvenient for everyone who hoped you'd stay available. I turned my eyes back to her. You will find this one day, Kate. I cannot describe the feelings he brings me. You and I were fun and passionate at times. But he is the light by which I see everything now. Well, if you see someone like that for me, send him my way. I would love to have the look in my eyes the same as you have for him. The song ended and I led Kate to a table so we could talk easier. How long do you plan to stay? I asked carefully. Her smile widened. Well, you will be busy for the next few days, I'm sure. So probably tomorrow morning, I need to get back to Irina and Tanya. Eleazar and Carmen are more comfortable when we are all together as well. Trying to keep the worry from my voice, and what will you tell them? Kate took a moment to look around, finding Leah looking back at her. I have spoken to Bella and Edward. I am convinced she tells the truth of her encounter with Lauren. The wolves here are something different from what we know. Not the savage monsters that attack everything in their path. Irina will come to terms with this. When I get back, we will all go into the deep woods for a couple of months and help her get past it. Kate held Leah's gaze for a moment longer. Then she said, very softly, she's different. Yes, I agreed. The word carried more weight than it should have. You didn't invite her to be polite, she said. I smiled, polite is for strangers. Or people you are unsure of. She paused, and you're looking at the future the way you always do, like it's something you can build with your hands. Heat rose in my chest, sharp and instinctive. Not embarrassment. Not exactly. Careful, I warned, not harshly. Kate lifted both hands a fraction in surrender. I'm not judging. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing to deny that would be honest. Kate's gaze softened, a rare thing for her. You and Thomas, you're thinking about what you can't have. When you should first spend time thinking of what you do have. My fingers went still. The ring on my hand was cool, unchanging. Kate didn't press. She let a silence form and breathe between us. He's already changed you, she said. I let him, I replied. Kate's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. That might be the most terrifying thing I've ever heard you say. I arched a brow. She shrugged, unapologetic. You were always the one who endured. The one who held. The one who survived. Her gaze sharpened. Now you're the one who wants. I didn't flinch from it. Because it was true. The music shifted again, another song bleeding in, something faster, something meant to pull people back onto the grass and make them forget they'd ever been nervous. Kate rose smoothly from her chair, the movement graceful enough to be art and controlled enough to be harmless. I should go, she said. If I stay at this table any longer, Alice will decide I'm plotting. She wouldn't be wrong, I said. Kate's smile flashed, sharp as a blade and just as familiar. I'm always plotting. Then she leaned in and kissed my cheek, light, careful, a gesture meant for humans and performed well enough that any human watching would only see affection. Her voice was a whisper only I could hear. Enjoy your husband, Edythe. I'll handle Irina. I held her gaze. Be careful. Kate's eyes glittered. Always. She turned away before I could say anything else, slipping back into the reception. I watched her go, then let my attention drift back to Leah. Leah was still seated. Still stiff. Still watching. And when our eyes met across the space, she didn't look away. Neither did I. Until a thought crossed my mind, and it caused me to smile. It was easy enough to see the question in her eyes at my smile. I stood up and walked to Thomas, knowing Leah was still watching me. He'd drifted to the table that held the drinks and was talking with Ben. I assumed talking to Renee enough to escape made his throat dry. He was mid-drink when he became aware of my approach. Ben stopped talking and looked at me rather awkwardly. Hey. Edythe. Congratulations. I am really happy for you both. Ben's eyes kept moving in nervousness. I smiled my most jaunty smile. No, Ben. Thank you. For coming, and for bringing Angela. I can't tell you what it means to us to have you both here. With perfect timing, Motley Crue's Without You started over the speakers. Would you mind if I steal my husband for a dance? It sent a shiver down my spine being able to call him that, so I was doing it at every opportunity. Ben nodded, that's a good idea, I think I will ask Angela to dance as well. I took Thomas's hand and pulled him to the center of the dance area. As we began to dance, I saw Thomas's eyes catch Kate talking with Rosalie and Emmett. How was your talk with Kate, Mrs. Raizel? I laughed. I see I am not the only one getting a thrill out of our new labels for each other. He joined in my laughter. It went well, we will not have to worry about the Denali coven coming to take revenge for Laron. That's a relief. I don't think the pack even know that was a potential problem. I plan to keep it that way as well. Thomas's right hand stayed steady at my waist as we moved, the song pulling us along with that slow rhythm. Motley Crue wasn't exactly what Alice would have chosen if she'd been building a timeless moment, Too raw, too 80s, too honest, but it fit Thomas and I in ways that lace and violins never would. "We'll keep it that way," I agreed softly, and let my gaze drift past his shoulder. Leah was still seated. Thomas noticed the shift in my attention immediately. He always did. He didn't follow my gaze yet, he waited, like he was giving me the chance to decide whether I wanted to say it out loud. "You are planning something," he murmured. "I'm always planning something," I said, and couldn't keep the small amusement out of my voice. We turned slowly, just taking a moment to enjoy our day. The music swelled and he held me closer. I couldn't imagine ever being happier than I am right now, and yet I hope Thomas will prove me wrong. "So," I said lightly, steering the conversation where I wanted it. "What's going on with Charlie and Sue?" Thomas's mouth pulled into a faint, helpless smile. "No idea. But he looks less stoic when she's near him." He glanced again, quick. And Renee and Sue were giving each other a look. "I kind of wish you'd been there to interpret for me." "I saw enough," I said. "And you're right. It's something we'll need to keep an eye on. Forks will implode the second anyone notices. Charlie the bachelor sheriff is something of a town legend." Thomas huffed a quiet laugh. "That's an understatement." "Bella will be leaving for school soon," I added, keeping my tone casual even as the word tasted like a lie. "Maybe he's realizing he likes coming home to someone. Even if he pretends he doesn't." Thomas's gaze softened. "Who knows, love?" There was the opening I was looking for. I let my eyes drift, deliberate, unhurried, to Leah. Still seated. Still stiff. Still watching like leaving would be easier than staying, and she was staying anyway. I looked back at Thomas. "Ask Leah to dance next." His eyebrows rose a fraction. "Not refusal. Surprise." "I think I'm the only one who's asked her so far," I continued, quiet enough that only he could hear. "And she came. She sat through everything. I want her to have a good time too, love." Thomas's jaw tightened once, an instinctive flicker of protectiveness I don't think he noticed, and then, it eased. He followed my gaze at last, found Leah, and held the look for a beat. "Okay," he said simply. "I'll ask." The music carried us through the last few measures. When it ended, he didn't let go of my hand right away, just squeezed once, a silent "I'm with you." Then he stepped back and started walking straight toward Leah, the way he always did when he'd chosen something. Leah POV. I saw him coming before he was halfway across the yard. Of course I did. My first instinct was to look away. Not because I was scared of him. Not exactly. But because being watched, being noticed, at a vampire wedding in a yard full of things that could kill me if they sneezed wrong felt like volunteering for pain. But that was just physical pain. Thomas was possible emotional pain. So, I didn't look away. I'd done enough of that in the last couple of years. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell him over everything else. Warm skin. Soap. Something faint and metallic that wasn't blood and wasn't vampire, just him. Shifter. Human. Whatever he was when he chose to be. "Leah," he said, and didn't put anything on it. No edge. No fear. No fake friendliness. I kept my hands on my knees for a second longer than necessary, just to prove to myself that I was the one deciding what happened next. "You're brave," I told him flatly, because it was easier than admitting the other thing, that my stomach had tightened the moment he started my way. His mouth twitched. Not a smile. Something close. Probably stupid, too. I flicked my gaze past him without meaning to. Edythe was watching. Not like a predator. Not like a judge. Like someone holding a door open and letting me decide whether I wanted to walk through it. I hated how much that did something to me. Thomas followed the direction of my glance and then looked back at me, as if to say, I didn't come over here by accident. He held out his hand. Palm up. Fingers relaxed. No pressure. The music on the speakers shifted, something slower, something meant for couples and soft moments. The kind of song that made humans lean into each other and pretend the world wasn't complicated. Dance with me, he said. It was an ask, not an order. I stared at his hand like it was a trap. Because it could be. Not the hand itself. The meaning of it. A man asking me to dance at his wedding because his vampire bride had suggested it, because she wanted me to feel included, because she wanted to prove something. Because she wanted something. Because I might want something. My jaw worked once. I forced the words out before I could swallow them. Why? Thomas didn't pretend not to understand the question. He didn't give me a speech. He didn't say because Edythe asked. He didn't say because you look lonely. He just looked at me, steady, direct. Because you showed up, he said simply. You didn't have to. I huffed, sharp and quiet. That's not an answer. It is, he said, and there was a little steel under it. Not threatening. Certain. You came anyway. So you get one normal thing. One song. No agenda. My eyes narrowed. No agenda. His brows lifted. If you want an agenda, you'll have to ask my wife. She's the planner. The word wife landed wrong in my chest. Not jealousy. Not bitterness. Something more complicated. Something I didn't have permission to name. I didn't move. I could feel eyes on us. Humans pretending not to stare. Vampires pretending to be human. The whole yard balanced on string lights and delicate lies. My control, what if I slipped? What if my wolf snapped to the surface and I ruined everything? What if my hands shook and everyone noticed? What if I wanted something and it showed? I can't. I started, then stopped. Because I didn't even know which version of can't I meant. Thomas didn't fill in the blank for me. He waited. Hand still out. Breathing steady. Like he'd done this before with someone who didn't trust kindness. Like he'd learned how to stand there and not take it personally. You won't ruin anything, he said, quieter. And if you want to stop, you stop. No explanations. My throat felt tight. Stupid. Useless. I could say no. I should say no. Instead, I lifted my hand. My fingers hesitated an inch above his. Too many thoughts running through my head to take notice of any single one. Then I put my hand in his. His grip closed around mine, warm, careful, controlled. Okay, I said, and the word came out like surrender even though it wasn't. Thomas nodded once, as if that was all he needed, and led me toward the center of the dance area. I hesitated, several excuses jumped to my lips. He stopped them all. His hand tightened just a bit, and his face went stern for a moment. No. Not at the edges. You deserve the center as much as anyone. The words hit like a shove. Not hard. Not violent. Just, direct. I blinked at him, caught off guard by the certainty. By the way he said it, like it wasn't a kindness, like it was a fact he'd decided to enforce. I don't. I started. You do, he cut in, still quiet. Not sharp. Just final. One song. My jaw clenched. Every instinct in me wanted to refuse on principle. Pride. Habit. The old, familiar comfort of being the one who didn't need anything. But his grip didn't pull. He just stood there, holding the space open like a challenge and an invitation at the same time. So, I went. He led me into the cleared patch of grass where the lights made everything look softer than it was. The song was slow and forgiving, the kind that gave humans a script, hands here, bodies there, smiles on cue, and let them pretend they weren't terrified of doing it wrong. I was more terrified than any of them. Not of the dancing. Of the meaning. Thomas set his hand at my waist with careful distance, not pressing, not claiming. Like he understood boundaries better than most people who'd known me longer. I placed my hand on his shoulder and kept my fingers light. Too light. Like if I touched him properly, something in me would crack. We moved. One step. Another. I forced my body into the rhythm, forced my spine to loosen, forced my face into something neutral. The wolf in me stayed coiled, watchful, ready to bolt, ready to fight, ready to run before anyone could decide I didn't belong. Thomas didn't look around to see who was watching. He looked at me. Not hungry. Not curious. Not cautious. Just, there. You're stiff, he murmured. I'm fine. His mouth twitched. You're doing that thing where you say you're fine and your whole body votes no. I glared at him on reflex. He didn't flinch. Just kept guiding us through the slow turn like my glare was weather and he'd lived through worse storms. I don't do this anymore, I muttered. Dance. This, I snapped. Being, looked at. Thomas's grip didn't change. His voice stayed low. Yeah, he said. I noticed. There was no pity in it. No teasing, either. Just acknowledgement. Like he wasn't trying to fix me, just trying to stand in the same space with me without making it worse. We circled once, the grass damp under my shoes. I could feel eyes from the crowd, the weight of attention like hands on my skin. Humans pretending not to stare. Vampires pretending they weren't listening to every breath. I kept my chin up anyway. Thomas leaned in slightly, close enough that his words were only mine. You're not going to shift, he said. My breath snagged. He wasn't asking. He wasn't hoping. He was stating it like he'd decided my fear didn't get to make rules. You don't know that, I said, and it came out rougher than I meant. I do, he answered, calm as a locked door. Because you're not a bomb. You're a person. My throat tightened again, stupid and sudden. I hated him for saying it like that. Like it was obvious. Like he hadn't just stepped into the one sentence I never let anyone say around me without paying for it later. I swallowed hard and forced the next words through my teeth. And what if I want to be left alone? Thomas didn't hesitate. Then you would have left, he said simply. You wouldn't have come. You wouldn't be sitting in the middle of my reception with your shoulders squared like you're daring the world to try you. I stared at him. He stared back. And I realized, with a cold jolt, that he wasn't guessing. He wasn't being polite. He had seen me, again. Why is it that he sees me? Not Leah the problem. Not Leah the wolf. Not Leah the cautionary tale. Just, me. My steps faltered for half a beat. Thomas adjusted without breaking rhythm, steadying the turn like it was nothing. Breathe, he said, softer. Just breathe. One song. I forced air into my lungs like it was a choice and not a reflex. Why do you care, today of all days? I asked, quieter. The question that mattered. The one I shouldn't ask. Thomas's gaze didn't shift away. He didn't look toward Edythe. He didn't look toward the crowd. I care because I do, he said, and because she cares. There it was. The honest line. Then, after a beat, he added, voice lower, like he was offering something he didn't hand out lightly. Because you're here, for us. My chest did that stupid tightening thing again. I looked past him once, fast. Edythe was watching, still as stone, expression composed, but her eyes were on me like she was holding that door open and refusing to let me pretend I didn't see it. When I looked back at Thomas, his mouth pulled into that half-smile again. The one he tried to hide. See, he murmured. Center of the dance floor. Still alive? I scoffed. It came out almost like a laugh. Don't get cocky, I warned. His smile widened a fraction. Wouldn't dream of it. We turned again, slow and steady, and for a brief second, just one, my shoulders loosened. Maybe, 2 songs would be okay. I murmured. While I said that, I felt it inside, I had given up. No more, I won't lie to myself any longer, come what may. I was walking through the door. Edythe Cullen. No, Edythe. Raizel was holding open for me. Chapter 178, Wedding Night. Thomas POV. The last set of tail lights slid away down the drive and vanished between the trees, leaving the yard lit only by moonlight, string lights, and the stubborn glow of candles that had already started to sink in on themselves. The quiet after a crowd was its own kind of noise. My hand stayed in Edythe's without me thinking about it. Warm against cool. Shifter against vampire. The contact grounded me in a way nothing else did. We walked back toward the house together. The barn loomed off to one side like a backup plan that never got used. The sky stayed merciful, forks withholding rain like it understood the stakes. We separated and walked around the backyard, blowing out candles and gathering anything that wouldn't survive a night out in the open. Once we were satisfied, we went inside for the night. The door shut behind us with a soft click. Inside still carried the smell of candles and sugar and damp grass carried in on shoes. The hall was dim, quiet, normal in a way that felt suspicious after everything that had occurred today. I stopped without meaning to. Edythe turned like she'd felt it, like she always felt it. No impatience. No pushing. Just attention. Are we really done? I asked, and my voice came out rougher than I meant. Yes, she said. Simple. Certain. I exhaled. My shoulders dropped a fraction. No more speeches, I muttered. No more pictures. No more Renee trying to adopt half your family. The corner of her mouth lifted. No more. I should have laughed. Instead, my throat tightened, because the word no more also meant now. Now that there weren't witnesses. Now that there weren't people between me and this beautiful creature I'd been trying not to stare at all day. Edythe stepped closer and lifted her hand to my jaw. Her touch was light, controlled, like she was reminding herself who she was touching and what her hands could do. Like she was choosing gentleness on purpose. I leaned into it comfortably. She didn't say anything, she just rose up on her toes and kissed me. Not the ceremony kiss. Not the one meant for an audience, timed for the approval of strangers and family. This was private, the stirrings of a hunger. This was the kind of kiss that made the rest of the world feel like it didn't matter the way it did before the ceremony. My hands went to her without thought, her waist, her back, the line of her arms, careful and steady, like my body understood the rules even if my brain was trying to short out. I heard myself make a sound against her mouth, something embarrassing and honest, and she didn't pull away. When she finally did, my breath was uneven and my heart felt like it was trying to climb out of my chest. If I had been paying attention, I would have noticed her breathing had completely stopped. Okay, I said hoarsely, because I had to say something. So. Guests gone. House, ours. Her eyes warmed at the word ours like it meant more than walls and a roof. Then my brain betrayed me by grabbing onto the only safe thought it could find. Emmett's going to be unbearable the next time we see him. Edythe's expression shifted, faint amusement. Even more than he already is. The memory hit me so clearly, I almost winced. Emmett had clapped me on the shoulder earlier with the kind of force that would have folded a normal man. I hadn't moved. He'd grinned like Christmas came early. Congratulations, he'd rumbled, loud enough that Jasper quickly turned to look at us. But not so loud it could be heard too far away. You survived the ceremony. Now try not to put her through a support wall. I'm not going to. I'd started. Emmett had leaned in, eyes bright. Also? You're the only one here with a pulse. If you pass out, I will never let you live it down. Jasper had appeared beside him like a shadow. Emmett. Emmett lifted both hands, still smiling. What? I'm being supportive. I wish someone had warned me before Rose and I knocked our first 2 houses down on ourselves. Support walls matter, man. Then, as I walked away, he'd called after me with cheerful menace. Good luck, and if I see you within 3 days, I will know it's because you had to take a break. We don't get tired. I rubbed a hand over my face now, half mortified, half helpless. He was being a complete menace. That earned me a look. Not angry. Not offended. Just, Edythe, evaluating the statement like it was a problem in need of a clean solution. Emmett enjoys boundaries, she said dryly. Mostly the idea of stepping on them. Glad we're in agreement. I pulled her in for a comfortable hug. She fit perfectly in my chest, my chin resting on the crown of her head. I let my mind drift and a thought hit me. I wanted to kick myself. Shit, I forgot to carry you over the threshold. She leaned back and looked me in the eye. There is still one more threshold to go tonight, love. It took me a second, but once I understood, I bent down and held one arm behind her back and the other I used to lift her up behind her knees. The aptly named bridal carry. Re-establishing eye contact. It's not that I'm impatient, I just don't want to forget again. Then I carried her directly up the stairs and into our bedroom. As soon as we entered our bedroom, Edythe began kissing me with an urgency I had never felt from her before. My mind played over our first encounter when she showed up in my room in a trench coat. Our nervous bumbling and fear of making awkward noises. Since that time, we had learned each other's bodies fairly well. But tonight, we would cross that line we had held back from. In this generation, virginity seemed more like something people were quick to give away, but Edythe had been born in a time when a girl's virginity was oftentimes the one thing she could bring to the marriage. Proof that she was pure and willing to dedicate herself to one person. It was a heavy thought for me. Taking something she had protected for almost 100 years. Edythe's hand slid up the back of my neck, fingers cold and sure, she pulled me down for another kiss as I held her. When she finally released my lips, I carefully set her down in front of me and reached for the zipper at the back of her dress. May I? I asked. Her eyes held mine. Then she nodded, once. I moved my hand slowly, not hesitant, not clumsy. Just careful, I wanted to take my time and appreciate every moment of this night. She watched my face, like she was memorizing every line of it. I have waited nearly a century for this moment. This last year has been harder to hold myself back than all the years before combined. As the zipper reached the end and her dress barely held onto her shoulders, I know, love. But I do not want to rush this, I want every moment of tonight to be as perfect as we can make it. She shrugged her shoulder and the dress slid down to the ground, leaving her with only a pair of sheer lace panties and a garter belt remaining. Then she started to unbutton my shirt. I quickly took my jacket off. Then she helped me take my shirt off. Next, she went for my belt and pants button. They fell to the floor. And I stood there in only my boxers and socks. R18 follows. Author's note at the end. Edythe moved first, bringing her cold hands to my chest and caressing my muscles. Taking extra time running her hands over my abdominal muscles, soft fingers running over each bump slowly. Her nails tickled me as they slid around just above the waistline of my boxers, and then she slid a finger between cloth and skin. Slowly working my boxers down and uncovering my rock-hard cock. Its head was nearly purple with the amount of blood stiffening it, precum covering it to the point it was about to drip on the floor. Her tongue flicked out and caught the liquid before the drop fell. Then she looked up and looked straight into my eyes as her mouth opened wide and engulfed me. The sensation of her mouth nearly made me roll my eyes back, but I wanted to keep eye contact as long as possible. I had once heard Mike talk about watching a video where a girl put a piece of ice in her mouth before going down on a guy. I was willing to bet large amounts of money that the feeling wouldn't hold a candle to the pleasure Edythe brought me with just her natural temperature. She started to slowly move forward with her mouth as she maintained eye contact, her tongue pressing up on the underside of my shaft in fast swirls. It was wonderful contrast to her slowly engulfing my cock. It looked like she had been holding out on me, or she had gotten some advice and decided to try it. I felt the tip of my cock bump the back of her throat and she didn't even pause, just kept pushing forward until my cock started to slide down her throat. Then she started to flex her throat and massage the head of my cock. We lost eye contact just before her nose touched me and I felt her lips hit the base of my cock. She held herself there, tongue still swirling, throat still massaging, and then she started to hum. My head leaned back and my eyes rolled up in pleasure. "Fuck, that feels amazing," I groaned out. Well, that's what I tried to say. I am not too sure I was being very articulate at the moment. When I felt her start to pull back, I quickly looked back down so I could catch her eyes again as soon as possible. When I saw her eyes, they too had little focus, but I locked on anyway. She only pulled back about halfway when she moved forward again. Faster this time. Then back to almost my tip and then swiftly back. My balls started to tingle and fill with an eruption imminent in a very short time. Her intensity wouldn't allow me to last much longer than the 5 minutes we had been going so far. Eye contact lost to pleasure once and for all, I placed my hand on her head as she went tip to base over and over again. As soon as my hand touched her head, she reached up and gripped my balls gently and it was all over. I grunted, unable to form a single word as I came straight down her throat. My hand holding her at the base of my cock as the rest twitched and bounced in her throat. When the twitching stopped, she slowly started to move back, tongue still swirling around my shaft as if to squeeze every last drop out before she released my cock from her lips with a loud pop. Her slow retreat gave me time to gather my thoughts, and as soon as she was free, I picked her up and placed her on the bed. I quickly removed my shorts from around my ankles and also took my socks off before joining her on the bed and removed her panties, leaving the garter belt. Once that was done, I gave her a fierce kiss that she returned with just as much heat as me. After a few more kisses I began moving my lips down her cheek to her neck, biting places I knew were tender even to her. My hands were massaging her tits, and my fingers had her nipples pinched and rolled between them, causing her to shiver and occasionally lift her back off the bed. When my lips and tongue found them, her moans increased and her hands once again found the back of my head, pushing my face harder into her soft mounds. My tongue rolled her nipples, and my teeth gently bit them, causing more wonderful sounds to escape her mouth. Releasing her nipple, I kissed her just under the areola and on a whim, I bit her a good deal harder than I had ever done before. She bounced as if I had shocked her and a loud moan informed me, she hadn't minded my action. I filed that away for later use. I continued peppering kiss down her belly as my fingers started to explore the folds of her pussy. She was absolutely dripping. I kept my touch at a tickle as I spread her juices up and down both lips, occasionally bumping her clit. Her hand was trying to push my head down faster, but I stubbornly kept the pace slow and deliberate. When I finally approached her clit, I let out a long exhale and then skipped directly over it, smiling at her sounds of dismay. Moving directly to her pussy lips, I started to lick up one and down the other, sometimes on the outside of the lip and then on the inside the next pass. Changing it up so she didn't get used to it, I worked her lips until she was squirming and begging me to send her over the ledge. As I licked up the right lip of her pussy this time, I went straight to her clit and squished it between my lips and turned my head, giving it a slight pull. At the same time, I shoved 2 fingers into her pussy up to the second knuckle and started to make come here motions with them. Immediately her hips started to buck up and down and the walls of her pussy clenched around my fingers, trying to hold them still, but I kept them making the hooking motion anyway. Right away, my hand and chin were soaking wet with her juice. Kissing my way back up her body, I again paused at her tits and began to give them more attention. This allowed her pussy time to lose some sensitivity and be ready for what was to come. As I was sucking on her left nipple, she grabbed my hand and found the fingers I had inserted into her and stuck them into her mouth, licking them clean. This too was a first, but not too surprising as she always wanted kisses after I went down on her. Still hot as fuck though. Once my fingers were clean, she drew me up into a kiss. Please, no more waiting. Fuck me. Without a word of response, I leaned back on my knees and moved into position, lining the head of my cock up and rubbing it between her pussy lips. Yes, yes. Put it in. Keeping my waist still with my cock lined up, I leaned forward and kissed her as I slowly started moving my waist forward, spreading her pussy open slowly. She was moaning into my mouth as I moved. At one point I felt her waist flinch and paused so she could get comfortable with the length I had inserted so far. After a brief adjustment time she broke our kiss. Please more, the heat. Oh God, the heat. You are splitting me. Then I felt it, a barrier. Her pussy was squeezing me like she wanted me out of her or like she never wanted me to leave. It was hard to tell which. Relax, love. I am going to push through when you nod. Then I will wait until the pain passes. Nod your head when you are ready. With no warning, Edythe spread her legs farther apart and placed her heels on my ass. Then she pushed me forward with her heels and I felt the barrier give way, and then she let out a long loud scream of pain mixed with pleasure. Her hands left my sides, and she grabbed the mattress and pulled. 2 fistfuls of mattress were now missing from it and probably thrown about the room. Oh God, I'm so full. Then she spent a moment panting before looking me in the eyes and nodding her head. It's okay now, keep moving. I tried to keep my pace slow to make sure she was comfortable, but her heels kept pushing my ass, forcing my way inside her faster. Finally, I was all the way in, based out. So, I held still for a moment. I am so full, and so hot. Fuck Thomas the First feels so good. I love you. Just tell me when you are ready for me to move. Then I leaned down and captured her lips, forcing my tongue into her mouth. The truth was that I didn't want to move yet. My cock felt like it was in a vice, a cold, wet, wonderful vice, that was trying to milk me. I wanted this moment to last. The dreaded name of 2-pump chump would destroy my self-esteem forever. Hoping that with a little time I could regain some control, I sucked on her tongue and hoped she would give me that needed time. She hugged me closer as we kissed and just that slight movement had her moaning into my mouth. When I felt I was in better control, I slowed my kisses and looked into her eyes questioningly. I felt her legs move, taking her heels from my ass, and then she nodded. So, I slowly began to move back. Her whimpering made my chest swell in pride. When I was about halfway out, I paused and slowly began to fill her again. Her eyes widened and she breathed in deeply, then let out a long low moan of pleasure. More, she moaned as I began to move back and forth just a little faster. Never leaving her by more than half. Her cries of pleasure drove me on and somehow, I held myself back, but I could see and feel her climax approaching. Once I recognized that, I pulled nearly all the way out for the first time and pushed all the way back in one long push. She screamed my name, but it wasn't too loud as she forgot to breathe in before saying it. I repeated this motion 2 more times before I realized I was past the point of no return myself. The eruption was happening, it was just a matter of seconds. At the same time, I realized that the walls of her pussy gripped me like my dick was a lifeline and she was about to fall down a cliff. I was sure that if I had been pulling out then she would have been able to stop me, but luckily, I was pushing in when my cock started to twitch inside her. Finishing that last thrust, I cried out as I started to come uncontrollably. At the same moment, Edythe's whole body started twitching and she wrapped her arms and legs around me, letting out one long stuttering moan that died out with the last of the air in her lungs. There was no doubt in my mind that if I hadn't learned to use my shifter strength as a human, she would have crushed me right then and there. But no one would ever be able to convince me it wasn't worth it, if that had happened. As I lay in Edythe's arms, my lungs working like bellows, a sense of satisfaction came over me. This was already the best night of my life, and it was still early. When I felt Edythe's arms relax around me, I looked into her half-lidded eyes as she said, "I am so on top next time." My cock was still buried inside her and it didn't feel like it was softening at all, so I rolled over until she was in her requested spot. Deal. AN. No chapter next Monday. The wife says my health doesn't look good if I don't spend this weekend with her. She isn't a nurse or doctor, but I think I will believe her anyway. See you Wednesday. Chapter 179, Domestic Damage. Thomas POV. Walking into the kitchen looking for food left me shaking my head. Being shut in with Edythe these last 4 days left the fridge nearly empty. Grabbing the egg carton, I was happy to see there were still 4 left, so I grabbed the butter and placed them on the counter and continued to look for something more to add to my midday meal. Remembering a ham steak in the freezer, I pulled it out and turned the sink water on to get enough water to soak the ham in to thaw it out quickly. After just seconds of water running, the nozzle started to spit air. Crap! I forgot. We had to turn the water main off because of the accident in the bathroom. The memory hit me, Edythe and I in the tub, laughter turning into something less innocent, and then everything going wrong at once. In the middle of our fun, we broke the tub and pulled the piping out of the wall. The sudden spray of water made me jump up, and I caught the sink wrong, yanked it away from the wall like it weighed nothing, sending even more water everywhere. Edythe ran to the basement and shut the water main off, and we laughed about it like we hadn't just declared war on the plumbing. Her laughing had been its own kind of dangerous. I exhaled, trying not to think about how quickly fixing the bathroom had stopped being the priority, and returning to our new favorite pastime took over. Well, guess I'm going into town for food, I sighed as I decided to put the eggs and butter away, leaving the ham steak out to thaw for dinner. I walked upstairs to get dressed in street clothes and smiled in pride as I walked past the now broken bed. The legs must have folded because it looked like the frame was on the floor. The mattress looked like it had gone through a dull wood chipper, and most of the center support slats were obviously broken. Guess we'll need a whole new bed. Still smiling, I pulled on some clean clothes, found my wallet and truck keys, then went back downstairs. Walking into the living room, I noticed 4 metal poles protruding from the ceiling. The way they framed the ceiling fan left me wondering for a second until I realized I was actually looking at the legs of my bed. They'd been shoved through the floor of my bedroom all the way through the living room ceiling. Cool. Walking toward my truck I had an idea and pulled out my cell phone dialing Bella. Hey, sis. Hey yourself. How is married life treating you? Her tone made it seem like she was surprised to hear from me. I laughed. It has been, beyond words, Bells. The only reason I could bear to let her go is because I could see she was starting to hurt with how hungry she was. I paused, glancing back at the house. Speaking of which, you got room for one more at the dinner table. There is always room for you, Thomas. Well, as long as you give me enough notice to make extra, anyway. Thanks, sis. I'll be there in a few hours. I'm headed into town for lunch, and I'll probably wander a bit. Love you. Yeah, see you when you get here. When she hung up, I put my phone away and ran back inside to put that ham steak in the fridge, so it didn't go bad. Then I went back out to the truck and started it up to drive into town. My mood was very upbeat, so I hit play on the Burn CD Edythe had loaded into the stereo. The guitar riff from Dire Straits' Money for Nothing demanded the window go down and the volume go up. The town seemed more vibrant than usual, it was still grey and dingy with wet roads, but for some reason it just looked better to me. The rubber ring on my left hand probably had something to do with it, well that and the small aches and pains in places and muscles that had been overused the last few days. Deciding to take care of my hunger first, that called for the best, only, place not fast food in town, the Lodge. Pulling into the parking lot, I rolled up my window and cut off the whiny voice of Axl Rose singing about sweet children and hopped out of my truck. Pushing the door open, I gave a smile and a wave to Amber behind the counter and headed for an open booth to sit down. However, I crossed paths with a figure I barely recognized. Lauren Mallory, a very pregnant Lauren Mallory, was trying to get up from a booth. I heard her talking just before she noticed me. "I am really sorry, Jessica, but I need to go again. My little one must be kicking my bladder like a football." Seeing her struggle, I reached out a helping hand. "Could you use some leverage, Lauren?" She froze like my voice had turned the air solid. Then her head snapped up. For half a second her face was blank, then recognition hit, and it shifted into something sharper. "Oh," she said, breathy and disbelieving. "It's you." The last time we had spoken was when she tearfully asked for a way to get a hold of Johnny. The rumors, and now seeing her condition, even someone as clueless as me figured it out. Jessica, who was just about to reassure Lauren she would wait for her to come back from the bathroom, squeaked as her jaw locked in place. Her eyes were wide and shifting between me and Lauren. Lauren didn't look at her. Her gaze stayed on me, quick, scanning, taking inventory. The ring on my left hand. The smile on my face. The fact that I'd offered help instead of pretending I didn't see her like most of her old school mates. I kept my hand out. Not pushy. Not retreating. Lauren's pride fought her body for a full beat. Then her fingers latched onto my forearm. "Leverage," she muttered, like the word annoyed her. I braced my stance and gave her exactly what she needed: steady, not yanking, not treating her like she was fragile glass. She used my arm like a rail, pushed herself up, and when she was standing, she exhaled hard through her nose like she'd just won a small war. "Thank you," she said, and it came out stiff. Like she hated that she meant it. "No problem," I said. "You okay?" Lauren put a hand on her stomach automatically, palm spread over the curve. "Define okay." I took a step back and looked at her, and the words just fell out of my mouth. "You look good," I said, and immediately regretted how thin it sounded. "I mean, you look healthy. Like you've got, I don't know, a glow." Lauren blinked at me like she wasn't sure whether to be offended or to laugh. Jessica made a strangled noise that might have been a cough. "A glow," Lauren repeated flatly. "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "I'm not great at compliments. But you don't look sick or miserable, and considering Forks is basically permanent depression with trees, that feels like a miracle." For a second her mouth fought it. Then the corner of it twitched, almost a smile, almost permission. "Well," she said, shifting her weight like her spine had filed a complaint. "I am miserable. I'm just, also pregnant." "Fair," I said, and nodded toward the hallway. "You were trying to make it to the bathroom. Want me to walk you there, or do you want me to pretend I never existed?" Lauren's eyes narrowed. "You're weird now." "I've always been weird," I said. "You just didn't notice." That got a real exhale out of her, half laugh, half surrender. She took my forearm again. "Fine. Walk with me. But don't make a big deal out of it. I am pregnant, not 90. Jessica's eyes were still wide. "Lauren," I said. "Jessica," Lauren cut in, not unkind, just done. "I'm not dying. I'm peeing." Jessica's face turned the color of a stop sign. I kept my expression neutral and started toward the hallway at an easy pace, matching her steps. When we were far enough from the booth that the whole place couldn't hear us, Lauren's voice dropped. "So," she said. "You got married." My thumb brushed the ring without thinking. "Yeah. Edythe Cullen." "Edythe Raizel," I corrected automatically. Lauren's gaze flicked down to it again, then back up. "Small wedding. Small town," I said. "Rumors travel faster than logging trucks." She huffed. "People are saying it was exclusive." "It was family," I said simply. "And people we trust." That made her eyes sharpen, like trust was a word she'd never liked. We reached the bathroom door. Lauren paused, hand hovering over the handle. Then she looked at me, and her voice changed, less sharp, more careful. Do you know? She asked. I didn't pretend I didn't understand. Yeah, I said quietly. I know, Johnny is the father, right? Her jaw worked once. Pride and hurt wrestling in plain sight. Lauren swallowed. I didn't plan this, she said, and the words came out like she hated that she had to say them at all. It wasn't like that. I nodded once. Okay. Her eyes snapped to mine, suspicious. That's it? Just, okay. Lauren, I said, keeping my voice steady, you're standing here with a whole human inside you, looking like you might bite my head off if I breathe wrong. I'm not here to judge you. I paused. I just hope you're safe and taken care of. Something in her face cracked, fast, and then it was gone. She looked away. I'm fine. It was the same lie people always used when they didn't want help. I didn't call it out. She let out a half sob and then took another steadying breath. Surprisingly, Forks has some very good options for single mothers. Your new mother-in-law is to thank for that, I believe. Her mouth tightened, like the words tasted strange coming out of her. To hear the others talk, she's nearly single-handedly supported the single mother programs and the women's shelter for half the county. That landed on my chest, heavy and warm in the same breath. Yet, Esme had a very rough time before she met Carlisle. She tries to do everything she can for those going through rough patches. Lauren nodded once, fast. Yet, Esme. She looked away, blinking hard like she was mad at her own eyes. I didn't even know she did that stuff until I needed it. And then suddenly it was like she made a small, helpless gesture with her free hand. There were numbers. Names. A caseworker. A place I could go without having to explain why my hands were shaking. My jaw clenched. I kept my voice even. That's good. It is, she agreed, and the second word cracked. She pressed her fingers into the side of her belly like it anchored her. It's just embarrassing. Being the cautionary tale. You're not a cautionary tale, I said before I could stop myself. Lauren's eyes snapped back to mine, sharp again, defensive by reflex. You don't get to decide that. Fair. I exhaled through my nose. No, I don't. But I can decide you're still a person. I paused, because if I pushed too hard she'd bolt. And you're doing what you have to do. That counts. For a second, she just stared at me, like she was trying to find the angle. The pity. The judgment. The punchline. When she didn't find it, her shoulders sagged a fraction. I hate that I'm relieved, she muttered. Like I should be stronger than this. Being relieved you're not alone isn't weakness, I said. It's your brain finally taking a breath. Lauren swallowed. Her voice dropped. People keep asking if he's going to come back. I sighed. Have you been able to get a hold of him? She looked like she wanted to cry, as she shook her head. Nothing, it's like he dropped off the face of the earth. Her leg shifted and her face colored. I really have to go. Would you join us at our table? I nodded my head, sure, I will go order and meet you there. She barely had time to thank me before she rushed into the bathroom. Well, as much as anyone in her condition was able to rush. Chapter 180, Rumors and Residue. Thomas POV. The drive to Charlie's was so familiar that I barely thought about it as my hands turned the wheel at the proper times. I couldn't pretend that my lunch earlier with Lauren and Jessica didn't sit wrong with me. I did what I thought best and gave her the information I had about Johnny as I fought off Jessica's questions about my wedding and some rumor that it was so quick and quiet because Edythe was about to start showing a belly just months behind Lauren. I pitied the first person to let that rumor get back to Edythe and said as much to Jessica. I did my best to keep the mood light and be very careful with what I said before I took my leave from the two girls to get some shopping done. Once that was done, I ran it back to the house and dropped it off before making this trip now. I hoped Bella was cooking fish. Knowing that pulling into Charlie's driveway with my stereo blasting Sammy Hagar's I Can't Drive 55 was a bad idea, I turned it down several houses early. Pulling up, I turned the truck off and made my way to the door. Taking the steps two at a time, I paused when I grabbed the door handle. I gave the door 2 normal knocks before opening it to what I used to think of as home. "Hello, hope I am not too early," I called out. Charlie was sitting in his normal chair with a beer in his hand. "What did you knock for?" "Just come on in." I shrugged my shoulders, not answering him. Bella's voice called out from the kitchen, "You're early, I am still cooking." I took a deep breath through my nose and smiled at the smell. Looking back at Charlie, "I take it the fish were biting today." He flashed me a smile, even had enough to drop some off at the Clearwater home. Young Seth asked about going with me sometime. I settled back on the couch. "That's great, he is a good kid. Probably going to have some regrets about always turning his dad down to go fishing in the past." Charlie looked sad for a moment. "There is no medicine for regret, Thomas. Remember that when you are with Edythe. Sometimes forever isn't as long as we think it should be." We settled into watching TV as we waited for Bella to call us for dinner. I rubbed at my nose a couple of times like catching a bad smell, but the fish cooking had me doubting myself. After about 30 minutes, Bella called out, "Come eat." Charlie turned the TV off and I followed him in to sit at the table. He sat first, same seat as always. I took the other side, close enough to smell the fish and whatever else Bella had put in the oven that made my stomach tighten with hunger. Soon she walked over with a pan in oven mitts, set it down, and gave us both a look. "If either of you says one single thing about the kitchen smelling like fish, you're on dish duty." Charlie's mouth twitched. "Fair." I held up a hand. "I respect your labor." "Good," she said, and started serving. For a few minutes, the only sound was forks scraping plates and Charlie's beer can tapping the table when he set it down. It was comfortable. Familiar. A pocket of time where the world didn't feel like it was waiting to ambush us. Charlie was the one who broke it first, because of course he was. "So," he said, not looking up from his plate. "How's the newlywed situation?" Bella's eyes lifted to me, amused. Like she wanted to hear how I'd phrase it without saying anything that would make her choke. I cleared my throat. "It's good." Charlie snorted quietly. "That's the most vague answer I've ever heard." "That's because I am sure you don't want specifics," I said, deadpan. Bella made a sound that might have been a laugh if she hadn't been chewing. Charlie shook his head once, but his mouth tugged upward. "Fair." I took a bite, then let the silence stretch just long enough that it didn't feel like I was forcing it. But the thing from earlier, Lauren, Jessica, the weight of it, was still sitting in my chest like a stone. Bella noticed before I said anything. She always did. "What happened in town?" she asked lightly, like she was asking about groceries, but her eyes were watchful. Charlie's gaze flicked up. "Town." I exhaled. "I ran into Jessica and Lauren today, at the lodge." Bella went still. Charlie's expression hardened in that quiet, practical way it always did when someone's name came attached to trouble. "Lauren," Charlie repeated. "The one that used to run her mouth. The one from school." "Yeah," I said. "That Lauren. Though she isn't in school right now." Bella's voice stayed careful. "Is she okay?" I nodded once. "She's very noticeably pregnant." Bella blinked. "Oh." Charlie's fork paused as he shook his head. "Still can't believe they wouldn't let her go back to school. Not like she is contagious." Bella set her fork down. Did Lauren say anything about the father? I didn't look at Charlie when I answered, but I felt the shift in the room anyway. The way Charlie went a little more still. She asked about Johnny, I said. Again. Bella's eyes narrowed. She asked you. She asked me once before, I reminded her. Back when she was falling apart about it. Charlie's jaw worked once, like he wanted to have an opinion and didn't want to say it out loud at the table. I kept going, because if I didn't, I'd stall and then the whole thing would sit there between us like a loaded gun. I gave her Johnny's workplace number, I said. And I gave her a few names, friends of my mom's, people who might have heard from him. Bella watched me closely. Did she ask you to? Yes, I said simply. She asked. Charlie's voice came out low and blunt. You're playing messenger. I looked at him. I gave her some phone numbers, that's all, Charlie. That's how it starts, he said, not unkind, just firm. Then it turns into you being involved. Then it turns into you getting blamed when Johnny does what Johnny does. Bella's gaze flicked between us. She didn't interrupt. I nodded once, because he wasn't wrong. I get it. Charlie leaned back a fraction, eyes steady on mine. You can be decent without being responsible. I wasn't trying to be responsible, I said, keeping my voice even. I just didn't want to stand there and pretend she was invisible like most of our other classmates are doing. Charlie's expression softened by a hair. Yeah. I know. Bella picked her fork up again, like she was anchoring herself with something ordinary. You said Jessica was there, so I am sure you got some questions about the wedding. Was it bad? I groaned. Oh, you're going to love this. Charlie's brows lifted. Oh. She's spreading a rumor, I said, and looked at Bella as if this was her jurisdiction as the only human teenage girl in the room, that the wedding was small and quiet because Edythe's going to start showing a belly any day now. Bella froze. Then her face did something complicated that tried to become laughter and failed. Charlie choked on his beer. What? Yeah, I said. That was my response too. Bella covered her mouth, eyes wide. That doesn't even make. I know, I cut in. I told Jessica, politely, that I pity the first person who repeats that rumor within earshot of my wife. Charlie let out a low whistle. Smart. Bella's eyes narrowed, amused now. You said pity. I said pity, I confirmed. It felt like the most civilized threat I could offer. Charlie's gaze stayed on me a beat longer, then he nodded once, like he'd filed the whole conversation away under future trouble, likely. Dinner finished in that quieter way after heavier topics, small talk, a few comments about fishing, Bella complaining about the store being out of something she needed, Charlie pretending he didn't care and then asking questions anyway. When the plates were mostly cleared and Charlie stood with his beer to check the game, Bella nudged my arm. You ever going to get the last of your stuff from your old room? Think you still have some clothes and paintings up there? Come on, I'll show you. Bella pulled another beer from the fridge and set it next to Charlie as we went upstairs. Thanks, Bells, he said, not turning his gaze from the TV. I was first up the stairs with Bella right behind me when I stopped at the top landing. The smell of cooked fish was not as strong up here and I couldn't now identify what smell was bugging me earlier. Stay here. I whispered to Bella. Burnt sugar. Not fresh, but not too old either. I moved to my old door and opened it. Someone had been in there looking around. Has Edward brought anyone here or have you seen anyone new around? I asked Bella. No, what's going on? Call Edward, now. I said as I approached the door to her room. I wasn't trying to scare the girl, but the smell was heaviest behind her door. I opened it and walked in, looking around slowly. When I heard Bella talking to Edward, I held my hand out for the phone. When she handed it to me, I said, look around for anything missing Bella. She nodded and began to move around her room. Lifting the phone to my ear, I heard Edward's questions. "What's going on, Thomas?" Bella sounded scared. "There has been a carnivore in the house, Edward," I stated flatly. "Victoria?" came his questioning reply. "No, I would recognize her scent. This is someone I don't know. If I had to guess, it's only a day or two old also." I could hear the wind rushing past the microphone on his phone. "I am on my way as fast as I can." "Okay, I will call the pack. Charlie is here, so come quietly, I won't leave until I see you. Just stay with her." Edward snapped, then he hung up and I handed Bella her phone back. I pulled out mine and dialed Sam's phone, hoping to get lucky. It picked up on the second ring. "Thomas," came Sam's voice. "Has the pack run the border yet today?" "No, we meet up in about an hour. Why? Anything weird the last couple of nights?" "Nothing on our side." "What's going on, Thomas?" "I have the smell of a carnivore vampire in my sister's room, Sam. He was here within 2 days. I will get everyone together and check our side. Let me know what you find, and I will do the same." He hung up as soon as he finished speaking. I put my phone in my pocket and looked at Bella. "I don't see anything missing, Thomas. But some stuff has definitely been moved around." I nodded and settled in to wait for Edward. It was barely 10 minutes later that he came in through the open window. His eyes were alert and his lips pulled back, unconsciously showing his teeth. He went first to Bella and pulled her in for a quick hug before he started investigating the area. "It is not a scent I know either, so not one of our friends. Someone new?" I just nodded my head. Bella said nothing major looks like it is missing, and Sam is checking the Quileute border. But I am betting nothing came from there. They would have noticed last time they ran it. I tensed as a knock came from downstairs and then relaxed as I heard the voices. "Hey Charlie, is Bella home?" Alice's chirping voice. "I am looking for my wayward husband as well," came Edythe's voice. Charlie laughed. "Hey girls. Yeah, they are both upstairs, something about some stuff Thomas hasn't picked up yet from his room. Head on up." Chapter 181, Girls Talk 2. Edythe POV. The forest felt calm and quiet after my thirst had been satiated. While my hunger wasn't gone, it was now at least manageable. I was able to think again without my need for blood coloring every thought. For a moment I wished I could project my thoughts as well as read others. It would be a way to show people like Bella who wanted to become a vampire. We can explain the thirst and warn people about it, but feeling it is something entirely different. I shook the thought from my head as I continued waiting. No more meddling in that, it's between Edward and Bella now. Though I think Edward's leverage over her waiting until they are married took a hit when she watched me and Thomas go through the ceremony. Her return deal of sex before the change was also something I didn't see coming. Though listening to her fears about wanting blood more than Edward for the first few years was a valid concern, I took a moment to wonder at the idea that mine and Thomas's relationship had been easier on us than the one between Edward and Bella. How he resisted from feeding on her the first day was still a mystery to me. The wind shifted and blew my hair around a bit, and I lost the little bit of scent that still clung to the rock Thomas used to sit on. I wonder if I could talk Emmett into carrying it to my new backyard. But in the end decided against it. It was the place as much as the rock that meant so much to her. I will just have to bring him out here one day soon to renew his scent on the rock. My imagination went into a bit of overdrive, imagining the new ways we could get a good scent on the rock when I heard a rustling from the forest. Soon I was able to hear the pad of feet coming my way. "Leah." I perched on the highest point, hands folded in my lap, posture deliberately human, because I felt this meeting would require a certain kind of gentleness. The trees shifted. A grey shape moved between trunks with the quiet competence of a predator who wasn't trying to hide but wasn't advertising their presence either. Leah stepped into the clearing in her wolf form and stopped just shy of the open space, half in shadow, half in the watery spill of late afternoon light trying to burn through the clouds. Her ears were up. Her tail was still. Her gaze fixed on me like I was a line on the ground she hadn't decided to cross. I did not move to invite her closer. I waited. She took 2 steps forward, anyway, placing herself in the open like it was an act of stubbornness rather than trust. Her mind hit me the way it always did, sharp, layered, loud with reflex. Don't flinch. Don't give her a reason to pity you. Don't give her a reason to think you're weak. I let a small smile touch my mouth and pulled out of her mind. Would you prefer to stay in your wolf form, and I read your replies to me with my abilities? Or you could shift and we could talk normally. Though I hope you brought some clothes if you prefer that option. I find you very attractive and the last few days have ignited a new hunger in me that I have barely scratched the surface of until now. I laughed a bit self-depreciatingly. It took days to get myself under control enough to leave Thomas to hunt. A large portion of my self-control is at this moment holding me back from finding him and continuing our activities. The smile on Leah's wolf face was obvious at my words. Trying to hold on to some of my dignity, I pushed on. Just nod yes if you are okay with me in your mind. I promise not to snoop around in there and listen to only your surface thoughts. Leah's ears twitched at my words, and her gaze sharpened, half scandalized, half amused, entirely wary of me on principle. Then she did something I didn't expect from her. She dipped her head once, slow and deliberate. Yes. I let out a quiet breath I didn't need, more habit than necessity, and kept my eyes on her face instead of slipping back into the deeper currents of her mind. Thank you, I said simply. And for the record, if you ever want me out of your head, you only have to think it. The more you want me out, the harder it is for me to stay. Thank you for telling me that. Does it work that way with your brother too? No, he can't control his ability. It is always on, though he does try his best not to listen. I have felt it through him. It is hard to have every thought around you forced into your mind. I shuddered. You have to admit that it isn't really fair that you can read my thoughts whenever you want to. It's not like I can constantly think about keeping you out when I don't know if you are in there or not. You're right, I said. It isn't fair. I paused, then added, because truth mattered more than pride, I won't pretend it's not an advantage. I can promise you I won't use it to hurt you. That earned me a long look. Assessing. Measuring. Then her mind offered, grudgingly. I don't think you want to hurt me. No, I said simply. I don't. Leah's gaze slid past me, to the trees beyond, as if looking anywhere else would make the next part easier. Her thoughts were a storm trying to organize itself. I don't know how to do this. Talking about this. I waited again. Let her set the pace. Let her decide how much she could bear admitting. Finally, her eyes returned to mine. You want me to be part of your life, your relationship? Yes. I need to understand why. You have Thomas, and I could tell there was something between you and that new vampire female you danced with at the wedding. Why not share with her if you just want a threesome? I was a bit surprised at how observant Leah was to have noticed that. Yes, Kate and I explored a relationship for a few years. But it never advanced beyond that and now she is just a good friend. As for why you? There is something about your mind that draws me in and makes me feel warm. Safe. I paused for a moment, this time it was my eyes that drifted off into the trees. A part of it started one time when I was in Thomas's mind while he was shifted. That's the only time I can get into his mind, by the way. But he was thinking about you, and I could tell that if he and I had not met when we did, then he would have only had an interest in you. Unless I really pushed myself on him. I pulled my eyes back to look into Leah's eyes. I had seen you around before, and though I found you very attractive, I didn't enter your thoughts because there was no need to. I was perfectly content with my life as it was before Thomas came barging into it. But later on, when I accidentally entered your mind, I was enthralled by how it felt. Even though you were so miserable with everything going on, there was a warm safe spot in the middle that drew me in and made me feel like I do with Thomas. Just knowing I am wanted makes me desperate. Wait, that's... No, this isn't fair. You are able to hear my thoughts before I get them sorted. I quickly held up my hands in a placating gesture. It's okay, Leah. I understand. Our first thoughts are rarely what decide anything. I get that. I know the difference in a random thought and a firm thought-out one. Leah stopped pushing me out of her mind. It's still embarrassing as fuck. I feel naked, like you see everything I hide even from myself. I will always give you time to collect yourself, Leah. Like I said, I know which thoughts are random and what ones are directed at me, so I am concentrating only on the ones you send to me. It took Leah a few moments to calm down, and I stood there waiting for her patiently. So, as you could tell, I am open to the idea. What does Thomas think? Well, I haven't exactly told him yet. I didn't need to be in Leah's mind to see the questions there. Well, we have talked about the possibility of adding someone to our relationship. But it hasn't gotten to the point I have given names. More of a theoretical idea when we talked about it. And how did that conversation come up? Was he talking about someone else? Well, even before he went to Nepal, he had spoken of you more than a few times. And like I said, if it hadn't been for me, then he would have shown his interest in you eventually. But the main reason I brought it up at the time I did, is because I was thinking about Thomas's legacy. Again, Leah's mind was full of question marks. We were flying back from Italy after rescuing my brother, and it occurred to me that if we continued our relationship, then Thomas's line would end with him. Obviously, vampires cannot have children, so I wanted to plan ahead a bit. So, I am to be what? His broodmare? Leah thought with a little heat. Ready for this reaction, I was quick to calm her down. No. Thomas would never look at anyone like that. And I would never let him sleep with another woman he didn't love just to have children. If that was all I wanted, then I would have pushed for the fox shifter who wanted him back in Nepal. Granted, this was all before I entered your mind. And if I do not want children, then we don't have any. I will never die of natural causes, and theoretically if you and Thomas continue to shift regularly, then neither will you. Leah's ears angled forward, like she was trying to catch the loophole in that sentence. Theoretically. Yes, everything we are discussing right now is only theoretical, I admitted. There are no guarantees in our world. But the point is, this isn't a contract. It isn't a bargain. It's not you giving us something and us taking it. Her thoughts tightened around the next fear, the one she was trying not to hand me. Then what is it? I let my hands rest lightly on my knees, posture still human, still gentle. It's you choosing, I said. And us choosing you back. Everything else, children, logistics, whatever comes after, we know it's real. Leah held my gaze, wolf eyes unnervingly expressive when she stopped trying to hide behind teeth. And you think it could be real? Yes, I said, simply. Her mind flared, heat, and anger at herself for the heat. I'm not like you. I don't want you to be, I answered. I want you to be you. Leah's thoughts came quicker now, less guarded, like the dam had cracked. I don't know how to be in a relationship. Not anymore. Not after Sam. The pack. The way her life had become one long duty with no room left for softness. I didn't finish it for her. I just nodded once, a quiet I know without stealing her words. You don't have to know how, I said. You only have to be honest. We can learn the rest together, the three of us. Leah's gaze dropped to the ground for a moment, then lifted again. I am afraid Thomas is going to look at me like I'm a problem, like all the rest do already. No, I said, firm enough that it surprised even me. He won't. You can't promise that. I let a faint smile touch my mouth. I can promise you he's worse at pretending than you are. If he thinks you're a problem, you'll know in 5 seconds. Leah's mind snorted. That's not reassuring. It should be, I said. It means you won't be trapped guessing. Her thoughts shifted again, quieter now. He danced with me. Yes. He's never acted disgusted with me. No. He's never acted scared to be around me. No, because he never has been any of that with you. I agreed. Leah's ears twitched, annoyed by how much that mattered. That's rare for me lately. I know, I said softly. For a moment, neither of us filled the silence. The forest did it instead, wind, distant water, the slow breathing of a world that didn't care about our complicated little lives. Then Leah thought, almost like she was testing the words in her mouth before she ever spoke them aloud. I'm attracted to him. I bet it was the first time she had fully said that even to herself. I didn't react. Didn't tease. Didn't pounce on it. I just nodded once. And? I prompted gently. Leah's thoughts spiked, embarrassed and furious about the embarrassment. And I'm attracted to you too. That one landed in my chest like warmth, unexpected, and very welcome. I kept my voice even anyway. Thank you for saying it. Leah's tail flicked, irritated. Don't thank me like I just donated blood. I smiled, and this time I didn't hide it. Then how should I thank you? Her mind flashed me something ridiculous and vivid, me trying to pet her like a dog. Absolutely not. I laughed, quick and quiet. Understood. Leah's ears went back, but her thoughts softened around the edges. So, what now? Now, I said, we decide what you want this to look like, before we bring it to Thomas. Her mind snapped to that, sharp. You're really going to tell him? Yes, I said. But not like a trap. Not like a surprise. And not without your boundaries in place first. Leah paced a small circle, claws whispering on damp earth, then stopped again and faced me. What boundaries? Start with simple ones, I said. Do you want to keep this private for now? Do you want it discussed only in person? Do you want him to approach you, or do you want me there? Do you want distance at first, just time, just talking, before anything else changes? Leah's mind churned. Talking first, all three of us. I nodded. Talking first. And I don't want the pack to know. For as long as I can keep it away from them. That's reasonable, I said. And it's not a betrayal to want privacy. Her thoughts flashed bitter. Sam will think it is once this comes out. I didn't argue with that. I had heard enough of Sam's mind to know he would worry first, and call it duty. Then we do it carefully, I said. And we don't let anyone else's opinion decide your life. Leah's gaze held mine. And you really think Thomas won't run? I let my smile return, smaller, more knowing. Leah, I said, my husband is many things. A runner isn't one of them. Her thoughts caught on the word husband with a quick sting. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Want. I didn't rub it in. I only tilted my head, amused despite myself. And, just so you know, I added lightly, because she needed the pressure eased again, he's also persistent. Leah's ears twitched. That's your polite way of saying stubborn. Yes, I admitted. And attentive. I smiled suggestively. Her mind flashed me an image of Thomas's hands, safe, warm, steady, and then her mind took my words in a more intimate way. She immediately tried to slam a door on those thoughts. Stop. 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 I didn't push. I only said, softer. He's good at making a woman feel chosen. Leah's thoughts flared again, half mortified, half angry. You're doing this on purpose. I'm doing it because you keep pretending you don't want anything, I said. And it's exhausting to watch. Leah's tail flicked hard. I hate you. No, I corrected gently, you're just terrified. She went still. And her thoughts, finally, honestly, answered without hiding. Yes. I let that sit between us like truth deserves to sit. Then I said, quiet and steady. Okay. Then we take it slow. We build something that doesn't require you to be fearless. Only honest. Leah held my gaze. If he says yes, you're going to be okay sharing him. The question was barbed on purpose. A test. I didn't flinch. I already share him, I said simply. With his responsibilities. With his memories. With the pieces of his past that still wake him up some nights terrified and broken. Leah's thoughts stilled, listening. This, I continued, would be different. This would be intentional. Chosen. And yes, I'm okay with it, if it's you. Leah's mind flickered, quieter. Why? I didn't dress it up. Because I trust you, I said. Even when you're trying to be untrustworthy. Leah's ears went back, offended. I'm not trying to be untrustworthy. I smiled. Yes you are. That got another huff, wolf laughter, brief and unwilling. And for one fragile second, it felt like we were two women talking instead of two predators negotiating a truce. Then, a sudden tightening snapped through the air like a wire pulled taut. Leah's entire body locked, every muscle primed. And through the pack mind, Sam's command slammed into place. Border. Now. Everyone. Thomas smelled a new vampire in his sister's room. Leah's thoughts flared with immediate, furious frustration and then concern. Go to him. And then she bolted away towards the reservation to meet up with the pack. Leah's mind shoved one last thought at me, fierce as a promise. We're not done. No, I agreed. We're not. Though I was sure she was too far gone to hear me. Then I was moving, fast through trees, then faster, then forcing myself into human speed as houses appeared. I did not blur. I did not draw eyes. I did not give anyone an excuse to notice what I was. Charlie's house came into view. Alice was already there on the porch, too bright to be casual, her gaze snapping to mine the moment I arrived. Whatever she saw in my face made her expression sharpen. Edythe, she breathed, voice light and wrong. Did Edward or Thomas call you? No, I heard about it from someone else. I said quietly. Alice nodded once. Edward called me to see if I knew who it was. I didn't see anyone in my visions. We didn't waste more time talking between just us. Alice lifted her hand and knocked, cheerful timing, forced smile. Charlie opened the door, a smile covering his face as he saw us, warm and unsuspecting. Hey Charlie, is Bella home? I gave my best human smile. I am looking for my wayward husband as well.